of the and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Sunshine Law Notice. In accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, public meetings may be held in person or by means of communication equipment to include streaming services and other online meeting platforms. This meeting is being held in person and through the Zoom meeting platform, being broadcast from Bicentennial Hall, 25 Cedar Avenue, Fairhaven, New Jersey. Public participation for this regular council meeting of May 9th, 2022 is available by call-in phone number or through web conference Zoom. Members of the public will be on mute until it is time for questions, comments, which will be announced. At that time, the public has the opportunity to question, comment by phone or through Zoom by the raise hand button and will be called on at the appropriate time. Notice of this meeting was included in the schedule of meetings, which was adopted by resolution number 2022-13 and sent to the Asbury Park Press, the Two River Times, the Hub, and the Star Ledger on January 6th, 2022, with a location amendment published in the April 28th issue of the Asbury Park Press. It has been posted on the Borough website, the bulletin board and municipal building, and has remained continuously posted as required under the statute. With adequate notice having been given, the Borough Clerk is directed to include this statement in the minutes of this meeting. Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Here. Paul. Here. Here. Hugh.
Here.
Ness. Here.
Here.
Administrator Grant.
Thank you, Allison. Before we get going here, I just want to point out the reason that we are having this meeting in Bicentennial Hall. As you know, we are seriously considering many facilities projects at the moment. One of those projects is here at Bicentennial Hall. As we consider this specific project, we're thinking about the acoustics, the logistics for the staff, as well as the viability of hosting like meetings in the future. That's why we are here. And I look forward to this meeting. I believe this is since Hurricane Sandy, you mentioned there was one meeting at the community center, but this is the first time since then, besides anything at Knollwood, that we've had something outside of Borough Hall.
Once, meeting the organization about
2012. So first time in 10 years. Exciting stuff. Additionally, before I get going, I also want to just point out to the community, COVID is on the uptick. The transmission rate today was 1.23. That means for every one person that has COVID, they're transferring that COVID to 1.23 other people. Until that transmission rate is underneath 1, it's going to continue to go up. So I'm just asking all our residents to please be smart about what you're doing. Let's try and curb the spread of the virus again. We're going to get to the proclamation in a little while when the chief gets here. In the meantime, if Todd would like to take it away, we're going to get right to the restaurant committee. If you guys want to introduce yourselves and tell us about what you've been working on. We can move on to the McCarter Pond treatment. Sure.
It's just a very simple. As you know, we budget for and treat McCarter Pond on an as-needed basis. This year's proposal, which was dated February 14, 2022, from aquatic analyst, is in the packet. I did send it to the Environmental Commission as requested. The commentary, I don't think the Environmental Commission has an issue with the treatment itself. I believe it's more than the fact that they definitely want they want to hydrate. The authority to go ahead and execute this agreement used as needed at $750 a treatment. And we really just wait to see how it starts to look in fall. It starts to look like it's getting green and broken down and treated. If we don't treat the pond, it will be by late June, July will be truckers. So if it's okay with everybody to go ahead and execute this agreement and have the purchaser.
May I speak to that, please?
Absolutely.
Actually, I was going to address this in minutes too. There was a miscommunication on page 4 of the minutes where I made a report I specifically was asked by the Environmental Commission to ask that Borough hold off on chemical treatment. The thinking from the Environmental Commission, and I can certainly get something in writing, but after the last meeting, they asked me with unanimous and adamant voice to come here and make sure that the borough understood that by we have concerns about the chemical treatment. They also feel that it's been ineffective and that the repeated treatments sort of make it self-explanatory. Well, it makes it look better if it doesn't actually treat the problem. So they haven't get that in writing, but
I didn't hear you back, thank you back to me, but I wasn't email.
I don't know if I was copied on that, but I'd be happy to facilitate. If we could, just delay.
And I would just note, Tracy, that last year there was discussion on the Natural Area Committee about whether there was a place to store some of these oils from any hydro raking, if that were to be the direction the governing body goes. And I think that there was some consensus that we could do something to assist in that regard. So I'd have to obviously circle back with them to confirm, but to the extent that's something that's on the table moving forward, I can revisit with the natural area and we can see if hydro raking makes sense. I think that's what you're trying to say, right? In lieu of the treatment.
In lieu of the treatment, the hydro raking is the preferred option. In fact, chemical treatment may actually have a detrimental effect and may impact the spoils in such a way that we don't want them on the land.
Okay.
So that's the extent of the messaging that I'm giving. But if you want further detail, it sounds like environmental and natural areas should be in the.
Yep.
Okay.
Just-
You don't have the hydro done, before the fall. With the others.
Yeah,
You understand that?
that was going to be
Yes.
my question is that I think if that's what they would like to do, they need to come here in the next meeting because we need to talk about timeline and understand what needs to be done by the summer and what gets done afterwards and what are the costs involved. Because I think I just heard Teresa saying that if we don't do anything, the pond will be already in pretty bad shape by, you said June, Teresa?
Generally speaking, as soon as the warm weather hits.
So
sent that
I think we
email
need to
on April
understand
28th,
that.
Tracy,
Okay.
to Ralph, I copied Christie, you, and the mayor.
And maybe that was why they asked me to make sure I delivered that message at the last meeting.
It's fine.
So,
How many treatments at 790?
7:50, we as needed, Josh. The hotter the weather, and the least amount of rain, the worse it gets.
and what did we budget for that, Teresa?
I think I don't have my budget in front of me, Tracy, but I think we have like 5,000 in there for treatment, if I'm not mistaken,
Maybe 10?
maybe.
Let's roll right into a River Road update, if we could.
Okay. I met last week, Richard, I don't think it's the same night, obviously, but we were here, we met with our engineering public works committee last week. We have a variety of projects going on River Road. I'm going to address the first one. The first one I'd like to speak about is in your agenda packet tonight. It's a change order to Stratus Construction. As you recall, Precise was the winning bidder for our Streetscape West project on the road. Even though we awarded the bid, we have to put that project on hold due to the main work that we just here in water decided to do. So since we awarded that bid, there has been increasing unit costs for the materials like everything else, and consulting with the borough engineer and the borough attorney prepared a resolution to do a change order to allow us to move forward with the project under the new unit costs. Rich will answer any questions. I'll go through. The New Jersey American Water project is supposed to be concluded by the end of this week, hopefully. They're doing some last minute pieces. I know they are going to come back and take out some of the concrete that's underneath the paving. That work will be done at night, right, Chief?
Yes,
The
yeah.
concrete removal?
So probably the end of May, maybe June. We've got 2 weeks of cutting the concrete and then about 2 weeks.
In exchange for the delay of the project, New Jersey American Water has agreed to pay for the restoration costs of all of our crosswalks on the road. As you know, that when the county comes to the pay, they don't, they would not do any of that restoration work. It would be incumbent upon the borough to have done that. Then that brings us to crosswalk considerations. We need to talk about whether or not the governing body wants to continue with the decorative crosswalks with the striking on the edge.
High visibility.
High visibility striking on the edge. Rich is currently working on locations of crosswalk. And we obviously will need county approval for any of the crosswalks. And Rich can circle back to those topics. And lastly, the bike lane design and approval, which is designing the bike lanes and shower projects for River Road. They will have to be obviously approved by the county also. The county adopted a new policy last month, the county commissioners, and the county will no longer require the borough to pay for half the cost of the bike lane installation. They're gonna, in all of their areas where they're putting bike lanes, they're gonna pay for the cost of the county in its entirety. So that's great. Rich, do you want to take me through any of that?
The only thing I want to add is we started our contract the beginning of last week. We started Lake Avenue, Precise Construction. You'll see the Lucas construction trucks with a subcontractor to Precise for concrete work. Precise moved a few things around to get us in. You know, as soon as that weather broke, we did have a couple days of rain, so it's a bit of a fire drill, but we're starting to make some progress. We started at Lake, and we are currently approaching the pond, and then I have to take the chiefs because we have to coordinate traffic control for that work. So we're going to jump ahead a little bit, but you know, it all seems to be falling into place. This week's weather looks good, so we should see some progress out there for sidewalk, the ADA ramps, and driveways, and getting people back into driveways, etc. And then if we want to circle back on some of these other topics, if you guys have questions on certain things, we can address them as we go through tonight.
But Rich is going to need some direction. He needs to know what he's going to design in crosswalks as far as whether we're going to go with decorated crosswalks, which we currently have in downtown, or there's some feeling that the governing body wants to go in a different direction. He's going to be doing that.
I mean, as it relates to the crosswalks, I think there's two questions. One, do we put back what we have, the decorated style, with a high visibility stripe? Or do we do a standard crosswalk, which has, like we did at 3rd and Fairhaven Road, it's the 2-foot strips, it's like a ladder style. That's an option. But then the other question is, do we add additional crosswalks? And adding additional crosswalks will require some study, some engineering, and also altering not only the current design of the streetscape, but the other phases we've done, because we need to add those ADA ramps and see how things fall into place. In many cases, the intersections are T intersections, we call it. It's not a true like 4-way intersection. And you may have handicap ramps falling in front of people's houses, adjacent to their driveways. You've got conflicts of utility poles, hydrants, landscaping, street lights, planters, you know, et cetera, And when you start adding crosswalks, you also have to look at your sight distance as a driver, as a pedestrian, as a bicyclist, and even placement of signage. You should have that warning signage. You'll see the signage with the placard that says ahead, you know, the crosswalk, and then usually they'll do a down arrow at each crosswalk. So as you add additional crosswalks, you don't want to pollute the street too much with signage. So there's a lot that goes into it. Obviously, the first step is to take a look at what we have now, material-wise, what we have in the streetscape that's out to bid and construction, and then whether or not it's worth moving forward and adding some additional locations. I know that was discussed.
How many additional locations are you talking about?
You have to take a look at, obviously, we've got inquiries for like Back Road, for example, because the nearest crosswalk would be in front of Krausers or all the way down by Fairhaven Road. But there are some challenges there because of existing conditions. Then it really becomes, do we want all these crosswalks at church, at Maple? That, you know, the list goes on as you move west, and even east for that matter. So that you really, I haven't studied that, but I do know we started this effort with the streetscape. I think the first phase was in 05, 06. And as we proceeded, this will be, I think, the fourth phase, what we're doing now. There typically is a little pushback because it is a county road. And obviously it comes down to liability as well. Not only as an engineer, but from the county. You know, you need to look at all that it's not as simple as just adding crosswalks. But I guess tonight we just need some direction. We want to proceed with that type of initiative.
Well, are you looking for financial direction as far as the type of crosswalk? Are you looking for direction? It sounds as if you're not telling us how many crosswalks we're talking about. How do we provide direction if we
Well, we
don't?
have a current number and they're decorated. So let's just say we'll start with those two questions. You know, are we going to go with decorative crosswalks? That's the first discussion. And then as far as, you know, no matter where you put additional crosswalks, there will be concrete expense related to that, like Rich pointed out, rarely to the project, either ones that we're doing or ones that have already been done are going to have to be, if you add additional, you have to put extra, you know, extra concrete work in there.
Right now, we have decorative crosswalks from Smith Street all the way to Rumsfeld. We've got a commitment from the water company to replace all of those crosswalks at their cost. In our bid, which is from Lake Ave to Smith, we added those decorative crosswalks with the high visibility edge stripe, which is, you know, in line with the 18th grade. We're having discussions now with the water company, whether or not they need to, you know, do that as part of that contract as well, because of, you know, various considerations. So I don't know if it's so much a cost issue. I think it's more of a
Aesthetic?
final design, aesthetic.
Is one,
Can I ask a
is one question,
Oh, I'm sorry.
is one question whether they should all look the same? Because I think, are you suggesting we would have decorative crosswalks in some places and the other ones would look different? Is that strange?
This came up in our, you know, we do a bi-weekly or bi-monthly liaison meeting. This came up, Councilwoman Cole brought it to our attention about whether or not we should do some other type of crosswalk treatment rather than a decorative crosswalk. The decorative does add, you know, some design aesthetic for the downtown, and the product that we've used has been very effective. I can even argue that it does act somewhat as a traffic calming as well, because you see it, and we even made many of these crosswalks wider than a traditional crosswalk. So they kind of serve a couple of purposes. The other style crosswalk is what you see at Fairhaven and Third, which is just a double stripe on regular asphalt.
So that came up because we noted that the water company is going to provide allowance for the replacement of the crosswalks, which would offset the complete cost of those crosswalks. Knowing that we were doing streetscape west of the project, we talked about additional crosswalks, and what's driving that conversation is a priority for resident safety. To me, there's nothing more important than making sure our residents can safely cross River Road. Right now, we have between Fairhaven Road and between the two controlled intersections, there's two crosswalks. Yes, but there's two crosswalks, and that's an inadequate number of crosswalks for a pedestrian. We have lots of T intersections, and there are engineering difficulties and challenges for creating those crosswalks, but I place pedestrian safety and safety of the residents above And a new challenge, and I think we're up to it, which I might have to get a little creative, in fact, work with the county. I understand there's some bright minds in the county, maybe they'll have an opportunity to troubleshoot that with us. I don't know that every intersection will be able to have a crosswalk, but we need more than we have. So the thought was, if we could get more utility out of that $55,000 allowance from the water company and perhaps get more crosswalk, we could forego the decorative aspect and go to a more utilitarian crosswalk and perhaps get the greater pedestrian safety.
So I'll just, I guess I'll just react, but it's not, I'm not an expert on that. It seems to me that the decorative crosswalk adds something extra to the looks of the street, than being our main road and where our business district is. I think I also heard Rich say that it's wider and therefore it has a calming effect. And although we don't have that on Fairhaven Road or Third, I could see that being a benefit on River Road. Because it is the busiest road we have, where you have the most people moving. So my initial thought will be that we should stick with that style. And the other thing I would say is that we definitely need more crosswalks, but I would caution against putting in too many. Like if you think about Baton Road, for example, a lot of kids cross over to go to the boat club there. I can see that being a crosswalk, but if you have church and then you have Baton, then you have the next one, I just think it's too much. So we need to find that balance. We can't have a crosswalk every 2 blocks.
Rich,
That doesn't seem to me like that's practical.
Rich, what's a reasonable amount of crosswalks in your opinion to be added based on what we just discussed?
It comes down to walkability, what the average person is willing to walk. As Councilwoman said, there's one at Cedar, there's one at Navasink. And then obviously, Hants Road and Fairhaven Road. So there is pretty good distance in between. I think it's really figuring out what that balance is. That makes sense, but there's obstructions. There's driveways across from Baton, and they would land right into those driveways, one being a business. So, that's something we're looking at. We did talk to the county. We had a Zoom call with them a few weeks ago. They're willing to come out and meet with us because we need to get some input from them as well. It is their road. And as we had mentioned, they've got some new staff on board, which they're a little more, forward thinking with this type of stuff. So I'm confident we can find that balance. The problem is we've got limited time. We've got a concrete contract that's already been delayed. They want to get in and out of here, and then obviously we're up against the wall with the paving, for the county with their schedule, and then pile in the bike lane design and all that. So it's something we can.
And I want to be clear, what we have New Jersey American Water is not a dollar commitment. It's not a dollar commitment. It's a commitment to replace all the crosswalks that are currently there. And what we're negotiating with them now is whether or not they'll pay for the additional crosswalks in the Streetscape West project as part of increasing that commitment for them to do it. And they would hire a contractor to do the work. They're not cutting a check for a very.
Chris? Sorry.
Could we do a hybrid? I think it's important to keep the decorative sidewalks in the business district. It really adds to the feel of the business district. But perhaps as you're moving away from the business district, as you're getting closer to Red Bank, maybe put in the regular striped crosswalks.
We had talked about that as well, some type of hybrid and what that balance would be, and even some of the side streets. But right now we've got the decorative even, on the parallel of River Road, which is at those side streets. Yeah, we can look at that, definitely.
I think it's important to keep them in the business district.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good idea. Just, as we get further out, maybe just go with the regular.
Chris?
I had two. You want to go first?
Let's go first.
Two questions, or maybe a statement and then a question. I would support one at Church and one at Baton. I think Councilwoman Koch's idea is actually a good one, which was going to be my idea, but that's why I like it. She said it first, which is, we can have decorative downtown, but when it comes to some of these side streets, we can just go with a traditional striping. And then as far as Batten's concerned, can we just offset by 5 feet or 8 feet to marry it to a curb as opposed to a driveway? Because I could picture the driveways as you cross over River on Batten, maybe going not mid-block, but just offset it from the corner itself. I know that's irregular, but given the constraints we have, I think that might be.
That's something we're looking at. We just have to keep in mind the location of the plane for the firehouse. I know it's a little bit further down. But just
Yep.
all that activity that happens over there. So that's one of the reasons we requested a meeting with the county as well, just to kind of put our heads together and see what we can come up with.
So I would support two additional sidewalks and then just in a traditional setting rather than the press decorative version.
That makes sense.
Meg?
Could I ask one last question? We had a resident who lives on Tyson. I think you received that email too, requesting a sidewalk at that end of town, a crosswalk,
Mhm.
because there's really nothing as you're in that particular area for kids to cross over. So have you considered that at all?
So we looked at that and based on the geometry of the intersection, because of the offset with Lincoln Tyson, and you've got utility poles, hydrants, driveway, I believe, and another municipality being Red Bank to work with, it would be very challenging. So we do have the ability to put one in the next block east. What is that, Haddon Park?
Mhm.
No.
No, that's Tyson.
Yeah.
Haddon Park was where, did the resident live on Haddon Park? Yeah.
Is one side Red Bank and the other side Fairhaven?
Yeah. So there were a couple curb ramps there, but they weren't really correct and they weren't marked. So Nick and I in my office went out. We actually added one right before, it's actually right at Tyson.
So there will be a crosswalk.
Yeah, there will be a crosswalk.
So
So you have better visibility in that area than on my lake.
Meg?
I was just gonna say, I support Betsy's idea. I think that's a great idea. I think we absolutely need more crosswalks. And since we are doing the work, it is probably more efficient cost-wise to do it now and add them. So I realize it's crunch time to get the work done and make the decisions, but I think I'd be interested to hear recommendations of placement that will increase walkability on our main road and business district for sure.
Tracy, you have something else?
yeah, I was just gonna add, more crosswalks is the goal within reason, obviously, because crosswalk not spread out, appropriate balance. So to that end, Mike and I just gave the head nod that we'd like to attend the meeting with the county, understand the big picture and be able to appreciate where those limitations might restrict potential crosswalks, but where we might also be able to get them and creative and hopefully get the right balance of crosswalks for walking.
Great. It sounds, Rich, you have some general direction there to work with?
Yes, thank you.
The only last thing I'll add is it would be interesting to know the cost differential between the decorative versus the standard crosswalk.
Substantial.
Substantial, okay,
Substantial.
meaning 20,000,
Plus the
50,000.
striping versus the thermoplastic stripes, and then they heat the asphalt up and actually make the pattern. The cost for that is probably, it's in the bid, but
Okay.
it's certainly
It's-
more.
It's covered though by the water company.
The ones that we have already,
Yeah.
the additional ones would be on us if we are to put in additional.
But if we look at the hybrid option,
Right,
it might
Be
be,
cost
it might
effective.
just wash itself out somehow.
right,
Yeah.
exactly, okay, great,
I want another cost.
yeah, for sure.
Great. Carolyn, is everyone here? Okay. Todd? No, let's finish this segment. Todd, floor is yours. Restaurant committee, thank you for all being here.
Do we like to set up the
I mean, if you want us to just sit here.
That'd be great, yeah.
The closer you get to the microphone, the better, actually.
We are getting requests from those attending via
Zoom.
Zoom that they want us to speak into microphones. So of course, I don't think we have that. So
Well, when we do all the permanent stuff, we'll have microphones in each section. But if you guys get if you could get closer to this, it's gonna have a better quality outcome for the public. Thanks.
Hey, how we doing? Betsy, gonna come over here with us? No? No?
Do you want me to?
I don't know. This is your restaurant committee. This is the remaining members of the restaurant committee. I'm Todd Leader. This is Dan Bush to my left, and to my further left is Carolyn Ferguson. We were asked by the mayor and council a number of years ago to look into solutions for the problems that came out of the Dunkin' Donuts application before the planning board was on board. No exactly when that charter was, but it was pre-COVID. The committee started out with more people than we have now. We had a few people drop out. Because I'm able to be here tonight, Betsy's got a better seat across the table than she did with us. And so we submitted, before coming in tonight, a memo. I don't know how widely available the memo was made. I don't know if all members of the public have had an opportunity to review it. But the idea with the memo was to summarize the work that we did. And I think what we'll do tonight is that Carolyn will do kind of an overview of the different things that we analyzed. Dan will go through the list of things that we came up with that were not ordinances. And then at the end, I will talk about the ordinance that's included in the memo and how we got to that. There's a lot of material here. I don't know how many other issues you have. I just enjoyed the discussion about sidewalks. I don't think anyone has any idea what goes on in here until they come inside. So how much time did you allot for us?
I would say we're probably trying to keep the entirety of the discussion for tonight, somewhere in the 45-minute range.
Okay.
So generous.
So I think that there's some baseline of information that we need to get out there so that you understand. A lot of it's summarized in the memo, and after tonight, we can spend a little more time with that and talk about it, and then we'll come back. Carol, you want to start?
Yeah, so Dan Bush, I'm a 22-year resident of Fairhaven. Just a way of background, we all the members of the committee kind of all have diverse backgrounds. I'm an engineer and planner by trade, practicing in land use. So my role here has nothing to do with the professional role on this committee. It's purely as a resident. You know, you got Todd, attorney, Carolyn, business community here. And also we had Mike Nicko, who's also has a financial background. So we had a diverse amount of opinions. What I would just say is that the memo that you received is a consensus memo. It does not recognize, it's not one person's opinion. I can assure you that there are things that are in here that some of us agree on, some of us don't agree on, but it is a consensus of all. And it's like there's a lot of work, a lot of hours that we put into this together. I think it's important to understand that this is not, when we describe or speak to something, it's not what I'm going to say. It's not my opinion. It has to do with what we found in the course of our research. So I'm just briefly going to kind of go through and just summarize some of the points that are in the upfront. So just to kind of piggyback on what Todd had to say is, we started at the beginning, we started in September of 2019. That's when the council chartered this committee. We met basically on a weekly basis for the first several months. We had a public meeting. We ran a survey. We met with professionals, whether that be planners. We met with legal counsel. This is an ongoing process. It went on until early 2020 when the pandemic started, which basically tabled our work for a long period of time. Commencing earlier this year, in roughly February kind of timeframe, we started meeting again, pulled out our old memo, recognizing that some components of the memo that we basically drafted 2 years ago aren't necessarily perfectly aligned with today's world. We did not go back, and we talked about doing it, but we did not go back and rewrite this whole document per today exactly. So that's just called out just for reference that is it's documented that we didn't go back and rewrite this whole thing. I'll let Carolyn's going to go through basically a lot of the research that we did do, kind of the foundation of what we came up with, which is the kind of what we've got in here. So.
As you can imagine, this is a very complex issue. We did review a lot of documentation, normal stuff you would expect, things like the Fairhaven ordinances, the Fairhaven master plan, trade periodicals, scholarly articles. We did a lot of research on ordinances that other towns and communities have related regarding restaurants. And we had legal advice sharing different legal opinions that provided guidance as to what would be a fruitful path for us. As Dan mentioned, we had a public meeting in the fall of 2019. We were really eager to gather more information from the public about what they wanted. We know that the issue has two extremes, and that's kind of easy. But the restaurant business is very complex, and there's a lot of depth in that space between the two extremes. So we were really looking to get some kind of specific feedback from the public about what kind of restaurants they wanted to have in Fairhaven. We did an exercise with them during the public meeting. We put up logos of different restaurants. We picked like 50 different restaurants, some that were independent restaurants, some that were small chains, some that were large chains. We put their logos on the wall with just a little bit of information, like how many units they have, and if they were local to New Jersey or had anything specific to local, we noted that. And we get people red dots and green dots, and we ask them to walk around and tell us, I would like this restaurant here, that's green. I wouldn't like it here, that's red. The results of that exercise are in Appendix A in your memo. And you can see there's a large variety of restaurants, and we got feedback. Of course, the feedback is somewhat limited, just the people that were there. But we were really trying to extract the information in whatever way we could, because we were all eager to serve the desired public. Also, after that, the committee prepared a public survey, which probably many of you took. The survey results are also attached to this memo in Appendix B. There was 913 responses to the survey, which we believe to be a very great return. We reviewed the survey results, as you can imagine. And like I said, you'll find them in Appendix B. And you can note that the survey actually contained questions beyond restaurants. So I believe it's questions 1 through 12 are the questions that were relevant for restaurants. And that's it.
So after the survey, we just kind of reviewed the results of the survey, which is, it's in there, it's long, it's comprehensive. But it did, I'll say, provide some direction as to where we need to take our work going forward. And a lot of the results of that survey are really reflected in the summary that we have in the memo. So it indicated that the residents clearly value the business district and wanted to exist in harmony with the surrounding community. Our review kind of took it out of the box, because once we got the survey results, it kind of gave us a conglomeration of different ideas and, you know, what to do. And we kind of needed to narrow our focus, otherwise we would have been at this for another year or two. So like I said, we then met with planners, legal counsel, what have you. So after all that work, we prepared this memo, which is broken down into 6 sections. a lot of these are high altitude, like I call them goal based. They're not like, okay, I can just go do that. It's more, these are things to think about as you kind of move forward. I'm not going to read all, but they're broken into 6 sections. And quite frankly, in no really particular order. First was create and implement design standards. The idea behind the design standards is keeping the exterior appearance of the business consistent with the existing community character. The idea to create a harmonious relationship between the business district and the adjacent residential area. Some of the bulk standards, second section was speaking about revamping, looking at the bulk standards. We spent some time talking about parking a lot and how to, where parking should be located, shared parking, things of that nature. One of the items you'll note in there is about the idea of pulling buildings actually closer to the street so you can park behind it, things of that nature, and providing some flexibility for existing uses that have limited availability of parking, so looking at shared parking alternatives for that. And then also one of the things that came out of the survey was promoting bicycle usage and with businesses. So you'll see it in places where obviously they have bike racks, things of that nature to support the bicycle usage. Next section speaks to continue and enhance efforts to support small businesses in Fairhaven. So what we looked at was review administrative processes associated with zoning construction approvals for new business and encourage simplicity and efficiency in order to ensure that we are creating opportunities for small businesses to choose Fairhaven. So we had a lot of discussion about ways to make it easier for businesses to come to Fairhaven. So that kind of gets beyond the scope of the restaurant committee, but it is feedback that we got. Talked about hosting public meetings, things of that nature to seek input from the business community. One other area that the exempt development, so the next section, section 4, is speaks to improve the exempt development ordinance and update that ordinance to make it more understandable and user friendly. So we struggled sometimes with reading some of the ordinance sections with respect to interpretation and how you actually implement them. And then section 5 speaks to our lean forward. So just an acknowledgement that there's needs to be regular adaptation of our rules as times change, as businesses change, as the world around us changes. A couple other just kind of tidbit type of things to think about that we didn't see how the ordinance would address these type of things, and these are things to consider is whether restrictions exist regarding food trucks, for example. That there was overwhelming support that you'll note in the survey for outdoor dining. So regulations that would permit and promote outdoor dining, whether that be on sidewalk, what have you, but outdoor dining was something that was noted heavily as being supported by the community in the survey. And then that would also relate to relaxation potentially of parking standards to make, if you have walkability, things of that nature, to provide for that outdoor seating. And then section 6 has language associated with changes to the actual restaurant ordinance. This was in consultation, heavy consultation with legal counsel as to what I would just say is legal ways that the ordinance could be changed, and that language is specifically in here, which I would not read, but nonetheless, that language is in there. And that kind of summarizes everything that there's everything that we went through. It was a lot of work. I would encourage you to read. There's a lot in there, even in the conclusions. I basically very quickly summarized it. But with that, I don't know if you want.
I do, and I'm really going to apologize. I have to go back and forth. Because I don't like sitting with my back to everybody, because I'm just not used to it. So if everybody remembers, there was once an application for a Dunkin' Donuts. And so what wound up happening was we had rooms full of people. And the discussion was, why are we doing this? Is this the right thing to do or not? So this started at the planning board, this went to the zoning board, this went back to the planning board. And I think a sound decision was made at the planning board level to allow the Dunkin' Donuts to come into Fairhaven based on the existing ordinances. And so the idea of the restaurant committee was, is this what Fairhaven wants? And so I think that the committee started trying to get an understanding of whether or not what we were hearing in the auditorium for having these meetings was representative of what all the members of the public felt, or whether or not this was just people that were particularly upset about Dunkin' and had a particular point of view. All of us have our own opinions, and as a member of the planning board, I have a different opinion after Dunkin' than I had after Over Easy and all the rest. But it wasn't really about trying to figure out what we thought, it was about capturing the public's point of view. We had that public meeting, and I promised at that public meeting that we would have another one. The reason we're doing this instead of that is because COVID hit and everything changed. And the truth is that we're having this discussion in public, and we should continue to have it in public, because this is how we do things here. So this is that public meeting. The survey is fantastic. I mean, if you haven't read the results of the survey, you really should. The survey made it very, very clear that people felt very, very strongly about a number of things. And for anyone that's familiar with the ordinances related to restaurants, that was really the origin of the dispute. They know that there were multiple sides of the argument as to whether or not what happened at Dunkin' was appropriate or not, based on the ordinances. So the true mission when we started was to get a handle on, well, what can we do? What are our choices as a community? And so we didn't just speak with legal counsel, but we also spoke with our planners. And so that conversation started really with, are we allowed to just ban the festival? What exactly can we do regularly? And we didn't get to that until after we had asked the public what they did. And what you'll see in the results of the meeting, which was picked up in that green, and in the survey results, which are available on the website as part of our memo, is that people wanted something that's a little bit different than what we have. And what I mean is that the law requires that we treat everybody the same. And so the law doesn't allow you to say, well, I like that one, and I don't like that one, and that one's terrible. How can we possibly have that? And so the truth of the matter is that if you wanted to know exactly what the public wants, that's what they want. They want you to call them, all of us want to be consulted, and then we want to say, yeah, that's a good one, let's do that. That's not an option. What we can do is we can ban fast food wholesale, okay? There is precedent in 2 court cases in New Jersey, been mentioned in a couple of other cases, where direct statutes, ordinances that prohibit fast food were not specifically challenged, but in the cases, the court allowed those ordinances to stand for reasons that we can but as members of the committee, what we said was, well, that's not really consistent with what we have, right? We've got bagels, sandwiches, we've got pizza, all that's fast food. That doesn't feel right. And so we kind of moved away from that. We thought that was too simple. We also recognized that Fairhaven really cares about its business. And we thought that that sort of approach was a little bit heavy-handed. So what we did was we saw other ways to do it. And that was really where our independent research of what other towns, other places all over the country were doing. And what that led us to was sort of an understanding that what people really don't know is not necessarily the fact that something's changed, but the fact that it feels like change, right? The fact that it doesn't feel like Fairhaven, it doesn't feel like a small business. What it feels like is a business dropped into Fairhaven that feels just like everywhere else. So that led us to really thinking about design standards. And so when you think about design standards in Fairhaven, what you recognize is, well, first of all, we all know what it is. We've got to pick one that everybody's going to like. So is that going to be the historic district, or is that going to be the Acme, or is that going to be somewhere in between? And if what we want is an ordinance that is legal, sustainable on judicial review, and doesn't cause us to be in a state of constant frustration with what we're permitting, that was a very difficult thing to pull off. I think that the committee feels like we should do that. We should pursue that. We should form another committee with people with fresh patience and time and go through that extensively, because we think that in the end, they're going to benefit. What we have in the downtown business district is a hodgepodge. It's one we like, it's ours, but it's a hodgepodge. What I can also tell you as a member of the zoning board is that when people come in to do things, there's always a cost. And so when we say to somebody, it should look like Nantucket, well, someone's got to write the check. And so if you want to support small business, but you want it to be pretty, you got to check that. And so that's not easy. So we took a pass. And that's not to say we don't think it's important, but we thought that we had evaluated enough of it to know that it was going to take more than what we had, and that it was broader public discussion that needs to be had. We looked at the formula businesses and said, well, maybe we can just ban formula business. And so we tried to find places where that's happened, and that has happened in the country. It's happened in other places. There was a movement to do that in New Jersey. That movement stopped because it was subject to judicial challenge, and the people that supported it back then, remember what city it was, New Jersey. And so that hasn't really been tested. So that brought us back to the fast food ordinance, which had been upheld by the Supreme Court in New Jersey. And what we did was we took that ordinance and we took it up, and we figured out the components of what is included as fast food under that ordinance, which is already been subject to judicial scrutiny, and we started to play with it to put into the definition of what fast food is, the formula business elements that gets us to what we thought people really don't like about fast food. And so the ordinance that we present was developed basically out of the framework of something that has been sustainably worked, with a very unique look at how we can try to not just say, we're not doing any of that, but rather allows us to evaluate the elements of these businesses that read like fast food, and to allow us to say no to the ones that are effectively straight formula business, chain restaurant, fast food type stuff, and say no to those, and say okay to the ones that are not those types of formula businesses, but are in fact chains. And in doing this, we met, I can't remember another committee or thing I've done in town, we met more, and we threw it around an awful lot. And what was really exciting about the end of the process, let's say it was 6 to 9 months. The memo, the first draft of the memo was actually finished in the summer of 2020. So we moved through COVID. We were meeting remotely at that point. But we spent a long time developing most of what you see in the memo now, and then we tabled it. We also tabled it not only because of COVID, because we had other things going on in town. And it was recommended to us that now's not really the right time to be doing something dramatic with regard to regulating restaurants coming into Fairfield. So when we went to pick it up again, there was thinking about, well, everything's different. And in fact, everything is different. And I suppose in a way everything is not and kind of the same. So you could ask yourself whether or not people in Fairfield feel differently. If Duncan came in tomorrow, whether or not you'd have to do the meetings in an auditorium or not. I think I know my answer. I think I have a pretty good guess. But I do think that people have come to appreciate the business district in a different way after COVID. And I think that all of the strong signals that we got through the survey, all the terrific responses from people that took the time to share their opinion so that their opinion could be added into the mix. I think, I think that those opinions are updated as they all were, right, a few years in, but I think everybody knows how important the business district is. So when you look at the ordinance, I think that you should be aware of how long we looked at it to try and find something that was not easy, that was something that was balanced, that would respond to what the public was saying during the hearings, and by and large, they said in the survey results when we asked them to. And carefully crafted language that is intended to allow us in that ordinance to have small chains and to have things that are indeed fast food without necessarily permitting things that may be what you think are fast food. So the ordinance that was the subject of all debate for government includes a number of elements. And so, briefly, drive-in restaurant, I think is slightly tweaked. It's a steward, it's somebody driving in, getting into the car. There was some ambiguity in terms of how it was interpreted during the document. The idea is that this is cleaned up slightly. Drive-through window is identified, and restaurants identified. Now, we have different types of restaurants right now, and so this ordinance proposes to collapse all that and just have one. But what we would do is we would exclude a fast food restaurant, and we would also exclude any restaurant that had a drive-through, and we would ban any restaurant from having a walk-up. The definition of fast food restaurant, it's only 6 lines, it's a little thick, but I'm just going to read it to you. The idea being that every restaurant is fine, except if it satisfies this definition of fast food. Fast food restaurant being an establishment of business which is essentially designed to quickly prepare, package, and dispense to customers for quick or ready consumption, a limited, uniform, or standardized variety of food and beverage products, and where the menu and/or practices of such an establishment or business are generally prescribed by contractual, franchise, or other such agreements to facilitate rapid service and turnover of customers. There's one more sentence, if that's it. Such establishments or businesses may or may not have tables, and the food and beverage products may be sold for consumption inside the building and/or off the premises. So later, not now, read it, think about it. It's this and it's that. And so what you have to do to understand what we're talking about is think about the businesses that are already here and think about whether or not you can see how this would permit them and how it would stop on them. And I think in that, we have tried to deliver something that was consistent with what we understood the mission to be. And admittedly a little different from what the public asked for. I think if you said straight up, what do they want? You could say ban fast food. But I think that that's not really what they meant. And I think that when you evaluate their answers a little more thoroughly, I think people know that they like Boots for Good and Lupo and maybe even Jack's. I don't know if Jack's can be considered a chain, but multiple restaurants. But both Lupo and Boots for Good are chains. And I think most people generally like them. They're not Domino's and they're not Dunkin', they're not Starbucks. So they're a different kind of chain. And so as we wrote this, the idea was that works, but the other ones don't. That was a lot. I hope it's okay.
Thank you, Todd, Dan, Carolyn, that was great. If you don't mind, I have 3 questions and then I'll go right down the line. So my first question is this conclusion that I'm reading here, is that unanimous of the entire committee's thoughts? I'm assuming you can speak for Michael as well.
I think that Dan and Carolyn.
What I described the document, it's in its entirety. So the entirety of the memo is a consensus document.
Okay.
So that's why I kind of prefaced the initial presentation with. There's things in here that Todd doesn't like. There's things in here that Dan and Carolyn like. There's all things in there that we don't like. There's things that each of us like in there. So there's nothing unanimous about, but the document is a consensus of all the findings. So what I would say is it's got to be read in its entirety, I think is the point.
Thank you. In this scenario, would you be proposing to grandfather in current businesses if they wanted to relocate to another location within the borough?
Indirectly, but not expressly. The way that it would work is that they would be. Anybody that's in place before an ordinance goes in is entitled to stay where they are. That's the way it is.
Can I
Stay where they are, but what if they
concern?
want to move somewhere else within the borough?
That would be a new application, just like you said.
So that would be a change of use, is what that would be.
Okay, would,
Well, it's a new application, so they're subject to the same
Criteria.
application process criteria that any.
as a new business would have
Every
to,
business in its existing location would stay exactly the way they are, nothing about this ordinance would change it. If they wanted to pick up and move next door, they would be subject to the same analysis as any business going into that place would go. They may or may not have to do a site plan, they may or may not be in exempt development, they may or may not qualify as fast food. All of that would be done independently. We did not propose or talk about, and I'm not sure it's legal, to suggest that people that were in Fairhaven before this would not be subject to the ordinance.
okay. How do you differentiate, for instance, Chopped Salad Company? And, they're in New York City and Maryland and Virginia and Washington DC, and they do some prepared foods that are sitting in their cases. If you want to walk in and get a salad that's already made or a wrap that's already made, in addition to that, they cut salads up right in front of you. How do you differentiate between that and Five Guys?
Well, so you have to analyze each one pursuant to the ordinance. So what I would say, this gets a little granular, okay? But what you would do is, let's do Five Guys, because I know that one, I don't know the high-end salad place that we're talking about. An establishment or business essentially designed to quickly prepare, package, and dispense for customers for quick and ready consumption. I could argue that Five Guys is that, and I could argue that Five Guys maybe isn't that. It's a little different from McDonald's. A limited, uniform, or standardized variety of food and beverage products, Five Guys clearly that. And where the menu or practices of such an establishment or business are generally prescribed by contractual franchise or other such agreements, clearly that. Every Five Guys I've ever been into has the same menu, has the same basic layout, it's standardized, the checkers, the whole thing, and facilitate rapid service and turnover of customers. So what you would do in analyzing Five Guys is you would have to establish a back and forth with an applicant to understand whether or not these criteria are satisfied or not as to meeting a fast food standard. And so my gut says that I'm assessing Five Guys to be fast food because it hits on these elements. And so other establishments could be looked at differently. Like if you look at Lupo, I like looking at Lupo because I didn't know Lupo was a chain until somebody told me Lupo was a chain. And so the reason I like Lupo is because it feels like a one-off restoration hardware type pizza place, right? It doesn't feel like on the chalkboard, that they're doing their menu items as it goes. They're doing what they're doing, but it's a chain. The elements of that are a chain don't bother me as a chain, and I think would allow the Lupos to avoid being fast food pursuant to this ordinance, where Domino's, with its red and white and blue and fixed menu items and standardized processes, and the franchise that would require that they do things a certain way, would say that Domino's would be best.
Thank you for that explanation. Meg, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have one. Looking at, I probably have more than one, sorry. I'm looking at fast food restaurant definition. The last sentence, does that add anything to that definition?
So I'm going to come and tell you that what you should do if you decide that you like this or that you want to investigate this in that level of granular detail, then we come back to Mike Irene. Mike Irene is very thoughtful and did a lot of research for us to understand what we're looking for and put together the ordinance around those concepts, and he will give you a much better response than me.
Okay, and just for the benefit of everybody else in the room, my thought is that sentence would fit under either restaurant or fast food restaurant. Establishment or business may or may not have tables, and the food or beverage products may be sold for consumption inside the building and or off premises. I don't see how that doesn't fit under both, so I think that's something I would want to work on if we were to consider moving forward with a definition of this type or manner. And my other question relates to a bit about what the mayor was just asking in terms of actually performing this evaluation. I mean, I know this because I'm an attorney, and if I were to be analyzing this ordinance, what I would do in trying to tick off the list, go through the process, but who or what or how would we map out, I guess, the application under this ordinance to ensure that who is evaluating, I guess it would be our zoning officer, evaluating this an applicant, to ensure that they had the appropriate information they needed to make an appropriate evaluation. Because I think that's, for me, where a lot of gray area creates problems down the road. That's how we end up in a situation. Well, there's a lot of reasons we end up in the situation we're in with Duncan, but that's what we're trying to avoid. And so for me, I would want it to be extremely meticulous and well laid out, and that all the information was absolutely provided from every single applicant before there was any evaluation, so that they had the full panoply of information to evaluate it, and then there's no question on the challenge. And maybe there will be, right? Because there always is. But I think for me, that's wherein lies the import of something like this, to be able to set out, say, if it's supported, that we then set it out really well in an application. Did the committee get into that minutia?
No, we recognize that the zoning officer would have to your point, we'll call it franchise agreement, whatever, they would have to get whatever documentation to say, do they meet this criteria or not? So they would have to they have to ask. I think it's, so whether that results, to your point, in some kind of form that somebody would have to complete, probably does.
Yeah, I would think it would be a lot of required information, and maybe not, because if you don't have it, but the question would have to be more intense than, do you have a standardized variety of food and beverage products? It would literally have to be, give me your menu, I think. I don't know. And so I think that's one of the things that I would say is really important, that if we do advance this, that we look at all those things.
In that scenario, maybe this is a question for Greg. Does the applicant sign their lease before they get approval from the town? Do they do it after? What happens when they sign the lease and then the town says, sorry, you can't open your store?
Number one, it depends on the landlord, it depends on the scenario. So like for example, usually have some type of out period, some sort of period where you figure all that out, if you're unsure, or the landlord that needs space of any type of Japanese space.
That's not a concern from your standpoint.
I don't think it's something that the government can take into account. That's kind of private parties, that's the risk.
Thank you.
So guys, so that's completely congratulations, and that's what I do when I'm not here. And so you're either going to make a contract or at least contingent on that or you're not, and you're not going to insulate people from their willingness to make that business decision. Maggie did ask some questions, but I didn't react. I want to make sure it's clear. I want to read to you, first of all, the fast food ordinance that was subjected to the Supreme Court scrutiny. An establishment of business which is essentially designed to dispense a limited variety of food and beverages, which are so prepared, packaged in paper and in other types of disposable wrappers and containers in a form for quick and ready consumption. Such establishments may or may not have tables, and the food or beverages may be sold for consumption inside the building or on premises. That's the one that the Supreme Court reacted to. If what you want to do is make it perfect, I think what you're not going to do is the discretion that the zoning officer has when applying our zoning standards in land use matters. And so if you want to look at a parallel, look at the exempt development ordinance. And right now, we created that because we didn't want every single application to go to the planning board. But if you want to be able to say, I want to know absolutely today what's in and what's out, you can never get there. You'll never get there. And so there is uncertainty in the way this gets applied. To the extent that there are different points of view in the committee, it's about that. But in this room, we can talk about it and think about it and we can do it, we proved it, 9 months, once a week, and throw it around, we can do it. But I think that outside of the context of what a land use ordinance really is, you lose track of what this stuff really reads like when you look at it. Look at the old ordinance. It was on the books for decades before it blew up at Dunkin' Donuts. Read any ordinance today, pick one up, let's talk about it. It's confusing, I promise. I don't care which one you pick. So I don't know that that standard is the right one in evaluating whether or not doing something is a good idea. And I assure you, there's no easy answers. And if I said to you fast food, we want to ban that, which is clear from the survey, that's the ordinance right there. Because Supreme Court already approved it. It's no less confusing. What we did was try and fold into it the stuff that would allow us, through our zoning officer and through our public input, to be able to pick and choose winners based on the things that we like.
Yeah, thank you, and I agree. I think for me, I would like this to be something that is user-friendly and easy for businesses to look at it, you know, just in passing and say, hey, yeah, I think my idea or my restaurant will fit this definition, or you know what, there's zero chance I'm gonna fit. And so I think having that user-friendliness is important for the business applicants, but also for our zoning officer, because if it's not, it becomes a scenario where we are having these open discussions about Dunkin' Donuts and Lupo and, you know, Booster Day. Not a lot of fun, but I'd prefer if we can just make it very clear and easy. We want businesses to come here, and so, you know, I think if we can make it so they can very clearly understand that out of the gate, I think that'd be great. I really appreciate the committee's work. I know this took a long time, 2019. Dunkin' Donuts feels like a bajillion years ago. So thank you to all the committee members for their hard work. I really appreciate it, and look forward to continuing to talk about this.
Thank you, Councilwoman Neff.
First of all, thank you for the work you've done. I think just the fact that you're meeting every week and that you actually had a meeting with the community and did a survey just demonstrates the depth of analysis and the time that you put in. So thank you for doing that. I'm just looking at a couple of different data points. I don't have the knowledge you have on everything here. But I'm looking, for example, of question 5 of the survey. There was a question about whether or not people would prefer, lowest preference or highest preference to chains, chain restaurants and so on. And the least preferred by far, according to the people who responded, would be the large chains, the large chain restaurants that, like the McDonald's or Burger King kind of places. So in my mind, it's kind of straightforward. When you're thinking about defining a large chain, a chain restaurant, is easier than the definition you have here for fast food restaurant, which I think is a little bit of what you're saying. Councilwoman Keefe, the fast food restaurant definition you have seems to me to be more broad-based and more subjective. And it's covering a number of things in the sense that it doesn't matter if you have tables or not, it might still be a fast food place. It doesn't matter if you're eating inside or outside, it may still be a fast food place. So in some ways, it gives more flexibility for you to, let's say, you still deem it to be a fast food restaurant that you don't want to have in town. But I can't see how you would actually implement this without going to the planning board for every single application. Maybe that's the intent. I honestly can't see, it's so broad-based that I don't know that I would like to necessarily see the zoning officer make a single decision on this. That'll be my first reaction, because it seems broad, very subjective to me. Different people could interpret different things here.
It is definitely subjective, for sure. The chain idea, I mean, we toyed around with the idea of, okay, well, what's the number? Like pick a number, like 5 chain, whatever, 5 restaurants, whatever. Two reasons. One, there's no way to do that. Like legally, we couldn't do that. So that's why that is, you can see the numbers speak for themselves. We could have drawn a line and said here that we couldn't do that. That was not a legal way to do it. So it is deliberately vague. It gives a
More open.
lot of latitude to a zoning officer to make a determination. So it's deliberately written in that manner. So you're right. Like it's there's a lot of shades of gray, but it's intentionally done that way.
Well, look, it's intellectually dishonest to assume that every McDonald's is a chain restaurant. The truth is, there are many other small businesses. There are many people in this country that have 1, 2, 5 family businesses that put their kids through college. So if what you're trying to do is be intellectually honest, which we were, I think you need to recognize that the origin of the business itself is not determined by what it looks like. That's number one. Number two, we determined that it was illegal to draw that line, which is why we didn't propose they could do that. And thirdly, out of context, you can make it seem super confusing. It's not. It's actually not.
No, I wouldn't call it confusing. I would call it open-ended enough that could be subject to debate. In some cases, that might be a place, maybe not a Burger King, but a place that might be more kind of in between one and the other. And I guess just in terms of process, I would like to know what the process of approval would be. And I question whether a single person should make that approval based on the subjectivity. That is, I'm not disagreeing with the approach. I'm just asking about who should approve it and whether it should be approved, should go through the planning board, for example, every single time. So that would be one question I have. And I just wanted to confirm, is our ordinance excluding fast food restaurants? Meaning if it is fast food, it's a no?
Right now.
That's what is that what you're proposing? Is that absolute no? I just want to make sure.
Yeah. So, right line test is drive-through. So if you got a drive-through, you can't do it right. But right now, if comes on drive-through, fine. So just know that what you got in terms of right line test is drive-through. The formula part of this, the formulaic part of this is what jumps off. When you walk into a place that looks just like all the others, you know that that's a formula structure. And when you go into appliables, or you go into Lupo, or you go into these smaller customized chains, you know when they've had an opportunity to create their space around their own ideas. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have some restrictions. Doesn't mean that there isn't some requirement related to franchise agreement, but that's what we're shooting for. And right now, Nick makes those decisions all day long about everything that happens in town. Now, does this add weight to his job? Sure. However many times a restaurant comes in, it's closed. But Nick's job's really hard. He does this literally all day long. Exact development right now, some people Dunkin' Donuts didn't want to go for a site plan. They thought that they were exempt, and they wanted Nick to not put them before the planning board. And Nick was smart enough to know that I'm not doing that in Fairhaven. And we went through 6, 7, 8, 9 months of hearings with a whole lot of people. And at the end of the day, it didn't really matter what people wanted, because the only thing that the planning board and the zoning board could do is uphold the rules that were on the books. And so at the end of the day, Nick had the ability to send it to the planning board, but the planning board didn't. I don't think the planning board had the right to close it. Of the lack, I suppose there's just lingering disagreements.
Good. Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Rodriguez.
Thank you. I'll keep it short. I know we're over our 45 minutes at this point. So we were talking, and I want to say thanks, everybody. I don't want to spend too much time thanking everybody, but I know how it is. And it takes a lot of time and effort, so I appreciate that. The design standards, I noticed you didn't use the term uniform anywhere in the descriptor here. And I do see that you used harmonious and materials that are natural and echo the character of the community. I think it's going to be relatively difficult to, like Lillian said, just apply. I mean, if it's up to Nick to determine that kind of material or character, I find that fairly difficult. I think I agree with it. I don't want to see a design standard that's uniform where every single place looks exactly the same as we go down the street, because the beauty of this town is it's eclectic, it's unique, it's got different funky things. If whether it's Boo Screw Doo and a giant sign, it probably wouldn't fly if it was under this character, under these guidelines, simply because it's tilted and it's sort of off center on the side of the building, and it doesn't seem harmonious with an upscale community, from what I can tell. That's my opinion and that's my reading. I'm just saying it's going to be difficult to roll this out. I commend you on putting all the thoughts you have here, but I just want to recognize the challenges.
It's in the design standards from the memo itself.
Yeah.
You understand that's not part of the ordinance, right? That's a separate independent thought process that we're recommending.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Todd.
I would just like to thank our committee for the hundreds of hours that they have put into this project. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of discussion, and I think I believe we've come up with a very workable product that will enable our zoning officer to, with the latitude that he needs to make a decision. So I want to thank the committee for all their hard work, and Mike Nicka, who's not here.
Thank you.
Just want to echo everyone's thoughts. I appreciate the work. It seems like forever ago we started this, and you actually answered a lot of my questions about it. You started from the beginning, questions people brought up to me, like, well, why not just ban restaurants and then you can have someone come through the process again. I'm the gatekeeper with that. You guys put in extra work. We're just trying to get the top out of that, and I think this is great. So you put a lot of thought process into this, and I appreciate that. I also like the recommendations, and as you've listened in, I think the council is moving forward with the encouragement to increase utilization of local businesses, sidewalks and pedestrian crosswalks and stuff like that. So it's always good to have some guidance from the experts. Thank you.
If I can amplify that, we didn't go in thinking we were going to come up with a lot more than working through an ordinance. But what I think we found was that there were so many good ideas that we were encountering in other areas. People doing things, people mentioned it to us, that I think that there are just a ton of good ideas in there that would foster, I think, an improved relationship between the business community and the residents. And all of that comes out. It isn't just, whether or not we have a done. It's whether or not people are engaged and whether or not they have an opportunity to embrace the business district and whether or not the business district feels embraced by the community. And to the extent they don't, can we make that better? And then there's a lot of things we can talk about.
Yeah, parking.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Mayor. Caroline, Dan, Mike, Betsy, I'd also like to thank numerous active members of our community who did participate in those meetings. I was among them. I agree with you, Todd. If this is what came out of it, and we have all this fruit from the labor of those conversations, that is a very positive outcome. And I really appreciate, I'm going to hopefully come back to this. There is a lot of meat in here, and I plan to be sure, pick up and run with it. That includes our partnership with this. It includes the potential for design guidelines, which is one of the thoughts that you have here that would involve us putting out an RFQ, hiring a firm, and going through the process of creating design guidelines. Even with this local standards, something I thought about as well. So there's a lot in here. I want to highlight one thing that came out of it, which in your careful assessment, you found that the public is in agreement with both the master plan and master plan that is in agreement with the views of the public. That is a small but critically important finding. And that means that we can take confidence in the findings of the master plan when we're making strategic decisions about setting priorities. So I appreciate the fact that that is mentioned. I will try to wrap up, as you can imagine, I have a lot to say on this topic. As one of the 6 legislators adopting laws to advance the goals of the people who live here. We're talking about restaurants in this conversation. This is a land use matter. Land use law is one of the 2 key levers that we use to set development trajectory. That's what this council can do with land use law. We get to decide as a community the direction of development in our business districts. We want to do too. So we will be looking at our zoning law, because this has to do with land law and zoning. We're talking about restaurants, but we're talking about the pattern of development, the intensity of development that we want along the way. What I know to be true, what is safe set forth in the master plan is that very humans can see small, thriving business district with cafes and sidewalk dining and all sorts of beautiful little shops, and you're able to walk into town, ride your bike, park conveniently, a dedicated bicycle parking area, and enjoy that pedestrian environment. To that end, land use laws a very important way that we can help preserve the pedestrian nature of our business district, preserve it and improve it. So even though we're talking about whether there's a, uniforms or beverage products, or the piece I want to say is this is not easy, what you guys have done, looking for individual words to provide Nick with the ability to decide what's in and what's out. They're attempting to give them a surgical knife instead of a butter knife, which is really what it's had up until now. So and to pick up on something that Councilwoman Keith and Councilwoman Neff is saying, this can only do so much. This brilliant definition that you have labored over and researched and tested and looked for court findings and professional document. This can only do so much. What it also needs is plain worded language that is voice of governing body that will provide clear guidance. This is not just what we don't want. Let's speak about what we do want. The zoning ordinance has 3 parts. It has a legislative title, which will state the intention of the governing body. Our intention is to preserve the Castletown business district, maintain pedestrian and maintain and improve pedestrian nature. These are legislative goals that will go into the title of a land use law. We'll say what we don't want, and then we'll get to say what we do want. We want to encourage this kind of development pattern. We'll express that in plain spoken language so that Nick, as well as prospective tenants, as well as property owners, can read a simple piece of legislative language that is spoken and read, clearly understood by anybody who picks it up. The difficult is this is a definition, very important definition. The ordinance includes 3 other parts. That is the context within which this definition will be needed. And perhaps you could circulate the existing B1, B2 zoning ordinance so people can see that and understand what I'm talking about.
Do you mind if I ask one more question? With regards to the suggestions on page 3 on create and implement a design standard and evaluate and revamp the bulk standards, how would you propose that this is done and in what time frame?
This is a long time frame to do these things. And I think, I don't know, when Tracy had said, you'd have to put out an RFP, like you'd hire a consultant, or for that matter, probably take words from Todd said, is form another committee to do that.
Can I clarify, are you asking about the parking? Or the design standards?
Yes, I'm talking about 1 and 2, create and implement design standards and evaluate and revamp the bulk standards and parking. I actually think we have a lot of things going on, but I think this is actually very important for how we view the future of our town, how it's gonna, what it's gonna look like. And I find this to be something that we should have a plan and a timeline, and move forward with. It's not something that should just stay on this page. So I, like the ordinance, I can see us making the changes and that's easier. But this idea to think about how to manage the parking and reduce the bulk standards and so on. I know we have issues with fair share housing and questions about whether we like it, what that might look like, or might not look like into the future. It just seems to me that it's along the same lines of asking what we would like our business district to look like. Anyways, just wanted to get a little bit more of a concrete idea of how we would do that. I would ask the council if that's something that you agree that we should ensure that this will be addressed by a committee.
It's definitely a broader, longer lead. Basically, and it was beyond the scope of the committee to get into that. That's why, I mean, quite frankly, it's a couple bullets on one page. It was really beyond the scope, but we recognize it was important and it should be in the document, but it really was not part of specifically the charter of the committee. So you're talking about something that would shape the community and you're talking about looking at a 25-year horizon. Like, what do you want the community to look like in that kind of time?
Understand, but
it's a big deal.
But it's your first two bullet points of your recommendation. Okay. So I take it that if it's your first two bullet points of your recommendation, it's important. I find that, I think it relates to what Councilwoman Cole is saying. It relates to what we want our community to look like. I think the council should think, doesn't have to be today, about how we are going to address this if we feel it's important and move forward with this analysis.
Well, that's a great segue. I think from what I've heard from everyone is there's definite interest in all of this work that you put together and making something here happen. But I think we need more information in order to do that and to really zone in on how we want this to look specifically. So
where does that belong? I guess that's my question is, where does that belong?
Can I suggest at this point, acknowledge receipt and plan a commitment to move forward on adopting this expanded definition of what the committee has discussed as fast food. They put a lot of effort into this definition. I can think of additional things that I might want to include in that. How do you do it? Advertising meetings. I don't know what you guys talked about. If certain retailers have multiple locations for their product, this would disqualify them. Signage. If there are other tools that can be added to this, I would not take away anything from what you have provided, and I think it's an excellent adjustment to amendment to our existing definition. I think tactically, we're going to have to decide, are we amending our ordinance or are we changing the definition? This is the definition from the code section of our code book. Greg, I'm going to ask you, Mr. Cannon, could you please provide for us the zoning ordinance? Would be 1B2, and then also incorporate this into the definition section and see what would have to be, what the amendment would look like. We're talking about amending the definition.
You want the entire zoning ordinance? Or you want this design standards?
Yeah, design standards. I think there's an interest in that. I don't want to speak for the whole council, but I agree there's an interest in design standards. I'll just offer to meet with the business community to talk about how we assemble some stakeholders to develop that and come back with some homework. But in this instance, for purposes of tonight, to make a plan to act on the amended definition for fast food.
But if I could ask Todd's question.
Yeah.
Mike just envisioned these definitions being pulled into our current zoning ordinance, and that would start. Forgive me, I mean, I was the Borough secretary, just think it's an issue. Like, kind of familiar with it, but does that definition, those definitions really solve the problem that occurred.
So the Dunkin' application dealt with different classes of restaurants. It also has the walk-up window or whatever it's called, and then the drive-in definition. We did not specifically task Mike with analyzing how everything moves together. We did this as an independent study, working from the case law backwards into the formula business stuff that we were really trying to dig in. And so I personally feel like it's been a really long time to get here, and I'm super anxious to hear what the public has to think and see what the council wants to do with it. But I don't think that it was taking so much time, we shouldn't have been meeting where Mike would have an opportunity to answer questions, to maybe talk about the integration of it, or maybe ask him in advance of the meeting whether or not if the council itself could stop it.
I understand what you're going to adopt this, let's take that first step, but I might truly put this together in a way that I'm not very familiar with, so I don't want to just really invent your own, or we were alternative very well. So.
I think that's what I was recommending. I get something in front of us.
Yeah, to move it to like a track, you're doing the other stuff. I understand what you're doing, but I think it's better, like, he's not, because he clearly studied this with you, knows how it fits together. I mean, I can obviously just amend the zoning with those definitions in there, but I'm not sure that's what Mike really intended.
I'm sure that Mike would be happy to do that. I believe that what we're going to find is that it's all striking, but I think that the exercise of perhaps, responding to next questions about exactly how some of these words are in there and why, I think it'd be helpful to understand that. And frankly, we really can't take credit for the ordinance itself. Mike drafted the ordinance around our ideas based on the conversations, but he's really the tactician and drew it up the way it is. What we did do is we tried to tease it out, we tried to push it, we tried to change it, we tried to make it better, we made it worse, we went back. So we did do a lot of that with him, but Mike.
Tom, you're referring to this definition as an ordinance.
Yes. So it is a series of things. It is the typing out of the drive-through. It's the changing of, you're making restaurants. You're going to take restaurants as a considered category. So we no longer have class 1, class 2, class 3, that stuff that was so hard to follow. You now only got restaurant. And what I think that has to be done is that we grow to make sure that now we just have one restaurant. That doesn't change things, that's how it's done. And Tracy, if I'm using the wrong words,
Well, it's a definition from our code book.
Yes.
So the body ordinance is the voice of the government, which is in Allison's office. She's the keeper of the laws, and they're in there. So there's a zoning ordinance for B1, B2, and we have to be careful to make sure that accurately reflects the intention of the governing body.
Tracy, I think the discussion point you're having is probably 3 clicks beyond where we are right now. And I think you and I might be the only ones in the room who are on the same wavelength in what you're talking about. So I'm not suggesting we shouldn't talk about it, but I think you're right. I think we need to put it on paper, look at it, play with it, talk about the discussion of the definition versus the ordinance. Are things fitting into place? And then, yeah.
That's fair. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. The definition becomes easier to put to use as a tool when the full ordinance is understood. And
this is like obviously what I meant when we were catching on. This is a throwback discussion to a lot of the discussions that happened during Dunkin' about the.
Not to draw it out, but.
Sorry. We're well beyond the mayor's 45-minute cap. We're all going to be in trouble.
And we're going to get to public comment as well, and I'm sure it might be some additional dialogue there. So if it's all right, I'm going to move forward from here. Thank you so much, really.
Yeah.
Just not only for tonight, but for all the time you spent on all of this. Before we get to public comment, I'd like to ask the chief. Obviously, it's very challenging. Really, my honor to present this population national police week, which is May 15th to May 21st. Whereas Congress and the President of the United States have designated the 15th day of May as police officer public safety officers work tirelessly to protect our citizens, enforce our rules, keep our neighborhoods safe. They report for duty, knowing full well the dangers they face and sacrifices they may be called upon today. During the week of May 15th to May 21st, 2022, we pay tribute to the thousands of men and women who serve us with extraordinary bravery. Remember the heroes who have laid down their lives in pursuit of a safer, more just society. And whereas the members of the Borough of Fairhaven Police Department play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the citizens of the Borough of Fairhaven. And whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their police department, and that members of our police department recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression or intimidation. And now, therefore, I, Joshua Alford, Mayor of the Borough of Fairhaven, do hereby proclaim the week of May 15th, 21st, 2022, as Police Week in the Borough of Fairhaven, and recognize the police officers of our community and country whose devotion to duty brings safety to all that they serve. We're now going to move to the public comment on agenda items. This is for agenda items only. Please stand and identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. Please try to limit your time to 3 minutes if possible. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make a comment?
I'm Carolyn Ferguson. When I'm not a member of the rest of my committee, I am also a commercial property owner in town. I own a business, and I've also been an officer of the Fairhaven Business Association for over 10 years. As you consider the findings of the restaurant committee, I'd like to toss out some things so that you have some things to think about from the business owner's perspective. It already came up today that any ordinance changes that are made should be considered to apply to our current businesses and our future businesses. Current businesses, as long as they stay in place and don't need to make a new application for any reason, basically are grandfathered in. But that term gets tossed around a lot. And what we need to remember is that if a business wants to expand, react to market conditions, become smaller, move to a new location, they will be treated as a new application into the town and subject to any new ordinances that are introduced. So just things to consider. I think we should consider the complexity of the language in the fast food ordinance. As business owners, many of us seek simple, clear language in our ordinances. Especially in Fairhaven, we have businesses that are very truly small. They don't have deep pockets. We would love to see simple ordinances that a business owner could navigate on their own, minimizing their need for costly professionals to help them get through the process. So that's one thing I'd like you to think about. The second thing is, I really want to think about the possible impact on our current businesses. When we look at that definition, some of the questions I had asked at different points were, does someone have to meet all the criteria that are mentioned in that definition? What if they just meet one or two? And it's a little, sometimes when I read it, it's hard for me to think about a specific business in town and understand whether or not they're going to be allowed by that definition. We do have 11 restaurants that are member businesses in the FHBA. 5 of them are parts of multi-unit organizations. I think many of us find these businesses to be assets to Fairhaven, and I would hope that they would not be negatively impacted by by any new ordinance that we introduced. The last thing is that just to consider the possible impact of the proposed fast food ordinance on the overall health of our business districts. We are seeing a trend in downtowns where is a reduced number of retail units, increased number of restaurant and service units. We see this, we have an example of it right here in town, in the Acme Shopping Center. In recent history, we have 3 new restaurants there where there was never any restaurants before. So we just, from the business perspective, we want to think about, what businesses are we ruling out or not encouraging to come to town, and how might that affect the overall vibrancy of our business district. The business association is made up of many types of businesses, but we all are helped when the business district is vibrant. It helps all of us in the different types of businesses. And just in closing, as we consider the future of restaurants in Fairhaven, I believe that most of us really want the same thing, and that any disagreements we have are really based on how we get there. I hope that the Business Association is eager to partner with the town to achieve a good outcome. And I hope that you will stay engaged with us on this topic. And that's it.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Sorry for the French accent. Mayor, also. My name is Michel José, 64 Buzzard Drive in Fairhaven. I'm also the Fairhaven Business Association president for the last 20 years, resident in this town for 33 years. I appreciate all the work that the committee did. I understand it's never easy to come up to a final say when you have so many different people with different views. But I do want to share a little bit my perspective. Right? As you know, as a resident of Fairhaven, we started the business in Fairhaven, and as there is a note at one point, we were looking at moving out of Fairhaven, not coming, but living, right? And over the last 15 years, I had the pleasure to work in Bridge, out, land. So I had my experience nearly 3 times, right? With the zoning board 3 times, with the planning board, the history committee, and everything else. And with those 3 projects, there was always the same challenge, just one, which was to understand the requirements. How could you comply, right? And I think I'm a smart French guy, but still, I could not do it along the way. And the answer I got from the town, from all the people was, well, hire professionals. They know the answers, right? And I said, okay, fine, maybe we can hire professionals. But again, when we say that, it's not only professionals on the applicant side, but it's also on the borrower side. So that becomes very concerning when you look at the mom and pop businesses that you have in Fairhaven. Because I don't see how they can afford to prepare for those expenses as we did with those 3 projects. As we heard before, the process is very long, it's very costly, and very frustrating. Again, to give you my example, the first project I did, 800, we hired, because it was a recommendation, a local Fairhaven expertise help, a lawyer and planner. But as we found out through the progression of our project, well, that wasn't good enough. We had to have a little bit more out-of-town legal and planning companies that basically were, again, out-of-town firms that basically decided to help us. But that's when I realized something that happened, and that really bothered me. Actually, I'm going to be writing a book about this. Is actually the term that started to appear between professionals as they're out there is open to interpretation. And some of the comments I heard before, right? Because it's open to interpretation from one professional against another one, like where you pay for both of them. And that's a big issue, right? So one idea, vague statement, and I do see a lot of contracts in our business, it's very open, it's very subjective. That's not fair. You cannot have a mom and pop shop be able to understand. I know there's some of the language it was specifically used. I think it was creative language. Well, how do you want the mom and pop to understand some of this? What is in between the lines? So what happened in our case? It got worse. Now you have a neighbor, just one neighbor, not 10, one neighbor that comes and basically has their own interpretation of what should be happening or not happening. And that's not right, because everybody's trying to guess what is the right thing to do. So at the end of this, it's not helping us, Fairhaven, to bring new businesses. Just as a reminder, we compete a lot in our business. And I think what you have to understand is from our perspective, from the business association perspective, we compete with other towns to bring those businesses in town. And believe me, it's not easy. I mean, I get some calls and people say, well, is your town trying and everything else? Well, it's because it's so complicated, so frustrating. There's not a single way we can say, you know what, go online, and there's a checklist of what you have to do. If it's just a signage, just a sign. Or if it is something that has to do with drainage, and the zoning requirements that are changing as a result. So what is the call to action to the council, to the mayor, right? I feel that the first thing, and again, I'm not a commercial real estate developer, I'm not a lawyer, I'm sorry, no offense, but at the end of the day, when we deal with our clients' contract, and our clients are there, right? But any type of contract or agreement starts with a definition. It's very clear what it is, what it is not. And then you can go and understand what the piece of paper is all about. And that is something that I understand there are some rules that we have to obey, comply, etc. But you have an opportunity to make it very transparent, to make it very simple, to make it very cost effective, because at the end of the day, we all agree, like Alan said, we all have the same goal, is to bring businesses in town. But this impedes us, to have some of this language doesn't make it clear, right? So I still think there should be, I don't see why there's not a reason to have clear definition of what is expected from an applicant. I also don't see why there's not a simple flow chart that basically shows all the different steps an applicant have to go through. To me, it's not complicated, and it's something that I would suggest. So again, I think we have an opportunity to be transparent, because if you don't do that, then you're going to invite only companies with deep pockets to come into town. That's the issue you have. But mom and pop will not be able to address it because they will be pushed out of town. So it's a reverse. So again, to make it very clear, concise, simple, like somebody else said, then I think is the way to go. So I think the KPI or the goal for you is to remove this statement, open to interpretation.
Michelle, it sounds like you're talking about a broader concept than just the memo that was presented tonight. Am I correct in that?
I think whatever is happening in the restaurant is going to carry over with other business. So that's my perspective, is that I think the restaurant, is a starting point.
Can I suggest that we're just not bouncing things off the wall? Is it possible maybe to meet with our business community liaison, Councilman Cole, and put some specific things down, and maybe we can start that process of putting something together that you're suggesting?
Yeah, but I think you have a gap there, and no offense to Todd. I mean, I understand what they're doing, and I understand the legal piece of it. I think the gap that needs to be filled out is for the mom and pop businesses. So yes, it may be beyond just a restaurant, and maybe the retail and the service companies. So yeah, I'm interested in that.
I think there's actually some synergies between the two things that you're speaking of as well.
I think it comes down to definition. It has to be clear in my mind.
I have a few thoughts for us to move on, to make this better.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then we'll report back. By the way.
Perfect. Perfect. Does anyone else have a comment? Sure. Sorry, can you just stand up and, sorry. Then you can sit down.
36 on one.
Thank you.
Sometimes I think it would be useful to have some clarification exercise like that done back for 3 years, because it really forces you to think about what the town needs. And several thoughts later, I realized that the people I saw at Duncan were young school kids. And I realized that I shouldn't expect to like them. And also, I shouldn't really expect to like any sort of place that's plain and universal. Because I've been around enough that I like variation. On the other hand, if I'm 13 and haven't seen anything I can understand why it might be best place to gather in Fairhaven. Go back in that corner and you can have a nice small area and you can check. But the point is, they spend money and they have a right to a share of capitalism, right?
Sorry,
And they live in a community and should serve their interests. Did you ask them?
Kid,
Good. And they like the place, or they just show up?
Are you asking whether or not the kids answered the survey?
I guess that's the only source that we're talking
I don't know if the survey asked for how full people were, probably did right up front. I know the master plan did. But I think what you're saying is right. My son likes something. And I've never been in, but I know that the kids are there a lot. And there's no question that there's a lot of things that are changing. And that all these different perspectives kind of have to get worked into it. And I think you're right to flag the fact that the kids sometimes like different stuff.
And I think that's an important aspect of community. I'm not sure I like excluding fast food. In the sense that I think children, or people even with my children, sometimes prefer fast food. And it's not a question of really what I like. It's whether the community provides the range of opportunities that I like, so that everybody has a chance to get something that they want. When it comes to looking, let me say it this way. Sometimes I know the cheapest thing possible. I know the cheapest thing is going to be the most uniform thing, because that's the cheapest way to provide it. And it would be convenient sometimes to have that in my community. It seems like what we fear is that everything will become like that. If we get limited to one thing like that, I think most people would say fine. But we fear, and I don't know how you get that into land use law or anything. But I expect that there are ways to say we have too much of this, we just can't have anything more.
Nicely said. I
Thank
will
you.
tell you, fast food is a category, and there are many types of food uses within that category. None of my concerns about that category have anything to do with what you can buy to eat or what it costs. My concerns have to do with how we preserve the character of businesses. You know, we all live in a small town. Those small town farms are protected by sign ordinances and scale codes, and whether they need lots of lighting because they're open until midnight or later. These are the kinds of layers of decisions that go into a good land use law, because it's not all going to happen with this definition. It's going to happen for sign ordinances. It's going to happen by putting ordinances what we do want to encourage, not just what we don't want. But the other thing that I feel like I want to touch on, based on what you said, is the two levers that we have to manage development, as I mentioned, was land use, and the other one is transportation. These two levers are how we get a corridor of convenience and thoroughfare, you know, where people just go through Fairhaven for a 3-minute pit stop on their way to some other destination. Or we can use these levers to create a robust and thriving neighborhood retail corridor that supports the folks that live here and immediate towns around us, which I believe both the master plan and all the other components of the 10-year plan that we started are asking for. And that planning has come from the community, so it's no surprise that they will get it, that they're in agreement. Long way of saying trip counts matter. Some uses generate a lot of car trips. Fast food does. And so that's how we control land use, keep it at the right intensity so we don't compete or create too much friction for pedestrians. Because if we're gonna have a thriving small town and business district, the first order of business is to honor the pedestrian. Always. And from that comes economic viability and lots of other things. I think we want to know. But how many fast food restaurants do you think we could have before we tilt in the wrong direction?
And I'm sort of know when I see it. You travel around this country, you think about that you feel it. But I think you have to be careful because you don't know who lives there. So I'm very reluctant to say that I could know. And I think this is a real problem, right? When you talk about we don't want people to drive there. And I agree. On the other hand, I'm not sure whether 13-year-old driving through is a much shorter journey. So I'm saying, I'm trying to say that what you provide for one age may allow another age to use it in ways that you don't like. And it's attention. I understand, but I still think it's attention we should fight for it. Because I think the way better is that way.
Thank you, Dick. Just to answer one of the questions that were put forth there on the age of the survey, question 31 does ask the age of the person filling it out. I imagine there probably was no one under the age of 18 based on the fact that it looks about like 3% of the people were 19 to 25. Mostly everyone else is older. Yes.
Was how to differentiate between fast food chains. And I'm wondering if this is possible, but is there a way that maybe they can over from that have a national chain versus a local and don't think it's a national chain? Small. And that's something that we could look at. And that might be a way to limit it.
It's a great suggestion. I actually do a lot of work with restaurants. One of the issues with that is sometimes you'll have a chain like, I don't know, anyone knows Ben's Kosher Deli in New York City, and they'll have 1 or 2 locations in Florida. And I guess you could call that a national chain, but it doesn't really feel like it has the essence of a national chain. So it just presents another challenge as far as trying to figure that out. But that is a great point. Thank you for bringing that up.
We look at that. We look at that, and of course, you can measure it that way. The question is whether or not we would enforce it. And so, if we were led to believe that we would be unable to do that, then I think that there's the legal analysis, and I think there is the whether or not we're being intellectually honest, I think is the word that I use. In terms of banning one type versus another, because if we try to get beneath that. Well, look, actually, it's funny you say that because I see this ordinance as encouraging the types of ordinances that you want. All you need to do is read it the other way, make it customized, slow it down, don't have someone tell you what you're doing, and don't intentionally try and make it too fast. And that's what we want. But the answer to your question is, can we look at that? Yes, we did. Could we enforce it that way? No, we didn't think so, and that's why we did.
Is there anyone else present as a public comment on agenda items only? No, Teresa, is there anyone on the Zoom? Okay. What do you have first, Teresa?
have Chris Hempstead. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hello, Mayor and Council. One quick thing, please, if you're near a microphone or and you have paper or pens or anything like that, please go quiet. It's been really, really loud on our end. I had two quick questions. One is one recommendation to Todd and everyone else who's worked so hard on, and Dan and everyone who's worked so hard on the restaurant stuff is, I believe there is some legal precedent. There is some national precedent on defining formula restaurant or a formula chain or a formula restaurant. So, I'm not the lawyer, but I do believe there is some precedent there. So we may want to consider adding a definition to our code to define what is a formula restaurant. And we don't have to debate it. I'm just throwing it out there because there certainly is precedent. There is, in other towns. I had a question because I came in, I couldn't really hear. I heard the stuff about the sidewalks on River Road. But I was particularly interested in hearing about and understanding it's a county road, but what is it looking like in terms of getting River Road repaved and back in order? Because it seems to be getting worse. Not better.
If you'd like to, sure. Councilman McHugh is going to jump in here.
Hey, Chris.
Thanks. Hey.
Yeah, I was going to get to this, but Rich kind of spoke to it earlier. So we're doing the Streetscape West now. That's like the landscape with curbing, the sidewalk and stuff like that. The time frame for the actual paving of River Road, the county puts all their bids out in June. Was it like late June, something like that? So hopefully we're at the top of the list. Have some reason to believe we are. And the bids can come back as soon as like mid to late July. And from there, earliest we could start maybe work late August, early fall, something along those lines. If keep my fingers crossed and all goes well. Does that sound about right, Rich?
Yes, that's typically the timeline. And we've met numerous times with the county to make sure we're at the top of this, although they are flexible with obviously knowing we have a streetscape going on and wrapping up a pretty substantial roadway job. So that schedule sometimes varies, but that is the target. Get everything out.
I appreciate the update. Yeah, I don't try to drink coffee while I'm driving down the street anymore. So you gotta
From Duncan?
from anywhere. It winds up all over my shirt.
Chris, we understand the question and the sacrifice of all the residents of Fairhaven based on the work that's been done. The optimist in me sees the end goal there, which is we're all going to have clean water and we're going to have a beautiful downtown on River Road. So I know it's a few short months away, but when we are done, I think everyone's going to appreciate the work that's been done and the final product.
Can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Next up, we have RB. I'm assuming it's replacing. Go ahead, Ruth.
Hi, Ruth.
Good evening. First, I want to say, Carolyn Ferguson, I agree with you 150%. Secondly, about the crosswalks. It's rather interesting. Since I live on River Road, I can't go out my driveway without going onto River Road in one direction or another. And I notice that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed that people crossing from the Acme Shopping Center to the other side of River Road do not walk down to Cedar Avenue for a crosswalk. They just cross River Road. So it's going to be a matter of, are you going to enforce that or are you not? Thirdly, Fairhaven used to be a village. Kids grew up from diapers to college in Fairhaven. Now it's more of a transient town. People stay 5 to 7 years or whatever. Since my kids graduated the school system in Fairhaven, it's been more than 40 years since the last one graduated, and it has changed dramatically. It used to be more diverse, and it used to be more sustainable. We actually had 3 drugstores. If you drew a wall around Fairhaven, it is not sustainable. We used to have a variety store. The one I think that represents Fairhaven most now is Harvey's Hardware Store. It's the old Fairhaven. And I think that's what we need more than anything else. Also, I have something that Fairhaven used to do for the residents, and I think you might be able to do it again. And that is the chipping yard over there on Allen Street. They used to put out mulch and chips and compost outside the gate, and residents could come and help themselves anytime. It costs you nothing if you've got that stuff to just make it available to the residents.
Thank you, Ruth.
Fifth and final is that I'm tuning in on a phone, and the acoustics are absolutely dreadful. They reverberate and they are dreadful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ruth. We're aware of the acoustics. I think it's something that as we move forward and decide whether or not the work at Bicentennial Hall is a go or a no-go, acoustics would be part of that conversation. So that certainly could be improved. The only other point that I want to specifically comment on is the enforcement of crosswalks. I'm not sure that that's in the cards, but for certain there's going to be education. I think we want to educate our youth to be using the crosswalks, as much as they possibly can. And I'm sure we can work with the schools on that as well. Teresa, anyone else on agenda items only?
No other hands.
No.
Mayor, can I just
Sure.
make a comment? Mike, Tracy, do you have any insight or this might touch brush committee into whether or not mulch or compost can be available to residents? Because I know back when I was a kid, that was also true, which is not that long ago. So you like that? I just gave myself a compliment. No, but it was. So is it something that's possible again? And would it be easy to facilitate and implement?
Yeah, it is possible. I thought we were doing that this time, and I was surprised. I wrote to Rich, I was like, why are we not doing this? As far as I know, it's just it's a different type of grind, right? To do the first grind,
right?
That to push it back through again.
But does it save us on the haul? Because we might be a little bit more on the grind because you have to get a little finer than the shred, but maybe we save on the haul and provide it back to our residents, right?
Right, and not to mention now we're importing mulch for buried fields. Right, so like, pull your hair out, kind of.
Right, so I would say that whether a DPW look into or a brush grinding, I think it's a worthy question that Ruth asked.
Yeah.
Okay, is it, Teresa?
If you want me to just clarify a few things. Yes, it is true, you would have to double grind the material. There is a cost associated with that, so that would have to be incorporated in the bid, and then you have to come up with a quantity. So the contractor performing that work knows what they're doing. And as it relates to the trail maintenance, I know Dick, you're here tonight, the natural area committee and my DPW staff, we're using wood chips rather than the shred. The shred typically turns into wood, it degrades faster, it becomes muddy. So we're getting wood chips from local tree companies at no cost. So it's a different product. It looks like we're using other material, like, to your point, but it's, there's no cost. And that's why you saw some chips getting dropped off at, you know, if you guys can vouch for that. So we've seen good success with that type of trail maintenance, using the chippings from tree removal rather than the shredding of the brush, which has, you know, more organics in it, and then it just becomes a muddy mess on the trails.
May I have a hand up there again, it's with laser again? Go ahead, Ruth, you can unmute yourself.
The comment is that it would have to be outside the gates, which you lock, because a lot of people want to pick it up on the weekends, and the gates to the shredding area are locked.
Thank you, Ruth. Teresa, anyone else?
No, sir.
Okay, moving along, looking for a motion to approve the April 25th regular and executive session minutes and April 27th special meeting minutes.
Motion.
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Excuse me, I have an amendment to minutes of the April 4th.
Okay.
For been a miscommunication, the minutes to the environmental commission, what's the public comment period. And asked them to be done. The report was the environmental commission is not one for technical done. And then it should be suspended at least for until we can discuss it again at the end of summer.
So should we pull that to fix it?
I'll just make a motion to amend the minutes as mentioned.
What's the,
It's just the opposite of what's written.
She's saying that the environmental commission did not suggest that we should treat the ponds with the chemical, which is what the minute states. Is everyone all right with that?
Yes.
Opposite that.
Got it?
Do not want to look for the front.
Someone want to make a new motion?
motion as amended?
Oh, Tracy just did.
I amended the motion to reflect the changes I described.
Do we need a second?
Second.
Allison, please have a roll call.
You're doing all three of them.
Yeah, yes, as amended, yes.
I think you have to call that one too.
You did
Call the
call it.
special meeting.
You
I did.
You did.
Yeah, I did. An April 27th special meetings. Yep.
Yes.
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 Thank you. Anyone have any old business? Old business? No? Okay, moving along, new business, council committee reports. Normally we'd start with Councilman Neff on finance.
I believe we have a finance committee coming up this week. Is it this Thursday? This Thursday? We will be looking closer at the finances suggested for the facilities that were presented at the special meeting. And also would like to thank Councilwoman Cole for advancing a note earlier today. I responded to that short time ago. We do leverage a, Councilwoman Cole had an idea that she brought forth to the committee. And it was about the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, thank you. And we do consider those opportunities as options to fund various needs for the town. We rely on our financial consultant who we appoint annually to consider all the different funding options. So if they do have something better, we would consider it. So it really depends on our credit rating, the interest rate at the time, and what the term of any debt we can issue versus what they can provide us in debt. So that's, I just want to be responsive to that as well.
Do you
As
wanna just
far
jump
as
right into borough facilities
are concerned, I wanted to just touch on, we haven't met since the last special meeting, which was on the 27th of April. I did meet with Councilwoman Cole. I've had side discussions with many folks on the council, including the mayor. And there are ways that we can further enhance the plans that we have out there. The finances, we need to take a long, hard look at and see if we can make some improvements there as well. The ideas that Councilwoman Cole brought forth have merit, substantially focused on the police department. We did get some comments, text messages, phone calls, emails, and run into you on the street or at Duncan, comments from the public. And so we're trying to address all those. I know that the council members and the mayor also providing their views on everything facilities wise. Becky Lamba, who was here earlier, I think, but isn't here now. She mentioned something about the movement of the curb cut. I have some ideas about how we can show how the movable gate will look, and it will remain closed. So it may actually improve what's currently there today. So I'll continue to address things like that. And then also Bill Perkins put an extensive note out, which I appreciate. There was a lot of information packed in there, which we will consider. So these plans are not final, and we'll continue to do our work. But we do have another meeting coming down the pipe in a couple of weeks to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Kristen Keefe on personnel.
I was just looking for, is that the new positions been posted? I thought so, okay.
I think they were on the email that went out today too.
Yeah.
I saw them.
Yeah. Oh, good. So the borough is looking to hire an assistant to the DPW operations, which is a very big functional operation, to assist Nick and Rich and all of their workings. So that has been posted to the borough website. There's also some seasonal opportunities, and did we also post a full-time laborer? Yep, I thought that was, I wasn't sure if that was also posted. So personnel opportunities are busy in Fairhaven, if you know anybody who might be interested. And that is it for personnel. And just on behalf of the Natural Area Committee, we posted our volunteer lease weekend last weekend to 2 days, 9 to 1. Everybody who came out to pull vines and drag logs. We had ages as young as 2, and everyone from town came out to help, and really appreciate it. Thank you. Huge shout out to our DPW who showed up with chainsaws and trucks and bobcats and whatever other John Deere machinery. Thank you to the community members who brought drinks and food and coordinated on signups. It was a really fun opportunity. If you've never done it before, please come to the next one. And thank you. It definitely sparked some great conversations on other opportunities in town. We talked a lot about vines. We're going to talk about vines and bamboo and other invasives in a couple of minutes. Really interesting stuff. So thank you everybody who participated in that.
One thing, does Zoe Arhan think you want to touch on that, or do you want me to brief on that?
I was gonna, I think we need to do that by resolution at the following meeting.
Fine.
I'm just thinking back to other projects. Yes?
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Yes.
Councilwoman Koch, Planning and Zoning, followed by Parks and Rec.
Our next planning board meeting is Tuesday night on May 17th at 7:30. I believe it's Zoom, Allison, it's Zoom, right? And the next zoning board meeting will be on June 2nd at 7:15. And I believe, I don't know if it's been decided, but they discussed going live. So I don't know if that finally. Still said it's Zoom, okay. They discussed it at the meeting last Thursday. For Parks and Recreation, the fishing derby, which was originally scheduled for last Saturday, has been rescheduled for June 4th. If you've already registered, you are still registered for the June 4th derby. However, if you'd like to join, because you're now available to on June 4th, you can go to the Our League apps on the recreation page and register. There are several sessions. You will not be allowed to participate unless you register ahead of time. The next big activity we have coming up is the Memorial Day ceremony, which will take place on Monday, May 30th. The parade will take off from Knollwood School and the ceremony at 9 o'clock, and the ceremony will take place in Memorial Park at approximately 9:30. And that is it, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman McHugh, Police, Fire, and Office of Emergency Management, followed by Engineering and DPW.
Thank you, Mayor. So a quick update for police. I know a lot of people have been wondering, knock on wood, still at 0. There's been a few car theft attempts, and our wonderful police department ran them out of that. So yeah, just continue to be vigilant, take away the bait, and hopefully they'll stop coming down. For engineering, DPW, we covered a lot of this. Rich covered a lot of Chris's question. Just recap a few things. The American Water job should end this week. As already, Streetscape West has started. Heading starting on late and moving east. What else did we talk about? Oh, crosswalks. That was the theme Councilwoman and I were talking about in our bi-monthly meeting. We know there's a need for crosswalks, not just on the road. We discussed Fairhaven Road down by Buttonwood. We got to talking about 3rd Street Phase 2, which needs to be approved in November. We were also discussing crosswalks there from the new kind of community parking at the DPW site, how to cross 3rd Street. It's also tricky over there, but I know Rich will come up with some creative solutions for that. So yeah, just trying to keep with the master plan and encourage pedestrian safety. The bike lane was spoken to because of the county's new policy. 100% of that will be covered. I think that was like a 45K savings. So yeah, it's substantial. We'll still have to pay for parking striping, but it's still a huge, great win for us for the bike lanes. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman McHugh. And I missed this note on my National Police Proclamation. I also want to throw in there that Corporal John Waltz will be participating in the Police Unity Bike Tour to Washington, D.C. And that this is going to be his 7th year. So that's a lot of miles.
Yes, sir.
He started today. So how far is he in one day? So like how far does
You go down, I think you go down to like somewhere in Delaware.
Oh my God. Good for him. Good for him. That's fantastic. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, man.
Councilwoman Cole, Borough Communications and Community Outreach.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see. New update, thanks to Betty Ann, we have a QR code that should facilitate signups for constant contact and other email pushes that come out of central office for information. So that'll be available. First launch will be at Buckley Day on May 14th. And then ongoing, we'll make sure that that QR code pops up where we need it to help folks sign up. The, let's see. The Shade Tree Commission has organized I'm going to go through all this because there's interesting work to report out on all this. The Shade Tree Commission, which was really with Councilman organized an Arbor Day art contest. I'm going to give a really big shout out to Penny Cass who is here, I'm sorry she's not here to receive gratitude. Personally, they've given a very generous contribution of $50 to each winner. And the winners this year are Taylor Wenzel, 4th grade, 5th grade, Avery Bonanno, 6th grade, Katie Quint and Lou Halpern, and 7th grade, Rosie Spiritual. So all the artwork will be on display at Lovely Live Day right here, Saturday, 10 to 2, along with a whole bunch of other wonderful fun stuff. And is there anything you want me to say about Lovely Live Day? Just come out. Just come out. Just come out.
Do we still need volunteers?
Yes.
Volunteers?
Oh, we need some volunteers, so there's some signups, but get in touch with us.
Great.
And let's give a little round of applause to both of you.
Yeah. So, let's see, I'll be attending the New Jersey Future Planning Conference, their annual planning conference, and encourage anybody who wants to attend to, sit on a seminar with me if you like. There are 2 days of virtual seminars. The third day is a networking in-person thing, optional. I look forward to working with the Business Association. I spent time with them in the past on these issues around challenges, opening and operating a small business in Fairhaven is notoriously challenging. So I look forward to reaching out to them and getting back to council to see what we could do to act as a real partner. The last thing I want to say is we had our facilities meeting on the 27th, and Councilman Rodriguez, thank you so much for pointing out the feedback. I'm continuing also to receive feedback. I'm encouraging that kind of feedback, even if it's just at the moment we're, cataloging it and deciding how and what's important to integrate. I think all the feedback is valuable at this point. Many people haven't had an opportunity to look at it and give that feedback until this most recent meeting. So I appreciate you identifying that and staying open to that feedback as it comes forward. A lot of it is centered around value engineering and really being thoughtful about how we make sure that we don't overspend and be thoughtful about what we are committed to financially. And that's my report.
Thank you, Councilwoman. We're moving along now to introduction of ordinances. Before I ask for a motion on 2022-03 supplement Borough Code Chapter 14 to prohibit the planting of bamboo and other invasive species. Is there anyone on the council that wants to speak to this before the motion?
Yeah, I would suggest discussion.
Councilwoman?
Sure. I've had the opportunity to review the proposed ordinance. I also received some feedback from some residents, some natural area committee members. I guess there is a question or just concern about including invasives in here in the manner that it's currently in here, as because the ordinance sort of goes through bamboo and then it addresses invasives, and they're a bit different the way that they function and grow. And so there was a concern that the invasives needed a little bit more attention. So I would suggest that we take a closer look at that, and perhaps we can extract that from this ordinance or table the entire ordinance until we have an opportunity to explore that a bit further.
What specifically are you referring to in terms of, are you saying the list of invasives needs to be expanded?
Not necessarily, but that the way, the treatment and discussion of it. So, as we all know, this ordinance came out of one resident who came forward with concerns about bamboo. Bamboo happens to be a specific type of invasive. But when we talk, so if you look at There's 14-11.3 and 14-11.4. So they are treated a bit differently because they are different. And so the discussion on invasives is that they've been here for a long time. They are everywhere. There's a question of how would this apply to borough property, for example. Great example is just this past weekend, we spent 2 whole days trying to remove invasives from the natural area because it kills our trees. So I think, my concern is, and the concerns that came to me in looking at this surrounded those issues. I think we might want to spend a little more time parsing the specific treatment of invasives.
As opposed to bamboo, you're saying you want to treat them separately?
I'm not saying we have to treat them separately. I'm just saying that the way that invasives are discussed and addressed in here, there's potentially problematic issues with it. Versus bamboo is, I think,
Very straightforward,
easier.
right?
Yes,
Yes.
easier.
So 14-11.3 is bamboo.
Yes.
Where is the section on invasives?
So if you flip to 14-11.4, invasive plants and prohibited plants.
Okay.
So for example, all existing plantings of invasive plants must be contained by appropriate physical barriers to prevent the growth or spread of invasive plants within any buffer zone of any property. My neighbor has English ivy crawling across my yard and all over, up my way. And even though they trim it back, which I appreciate, it's there. And this would technically be a violation of the ordinance because it would be in a buffer zone.
So don't have a
So-
list though, right, maybe you could explain, so. we have a
Well, I'm
list.
just trying to talk about the practical applications of that versus bamboo, which is everyone, maybe not everybody, most people are trying to get rid of bamboo.
Well,
English ivy might be something people really like and they want to keep, and they would need to also comply. But again, it's also, for example, a borough problem.
But ivy is not on here.
No.
To address your specific thing. So invasive plants shall be non-native, which include ragweed, multiple, hudson. So it doesn't take in all.
But maybe that's part of the problem too, is that we aren't inclusive enough in terms of invasives.
Well, I would like to offer at this point that
I could really clarify something and say why you guys. There are 3 things: bamboo, prohibited, and invasive. Prohibited are Japanese knotweed and Iranthus. They're pretty bad. Bamboo is awful, and invasives are ambiguous. And they're ambiguous as stated here because it says something like native and non-native, both. And it's been a very loose thing, and the worst thing is they're pernicious. That was the exact word, but it's a very loose thing. And I think the concern is in working with people in the community, it simply is too easy to say, my neighbor is growing yellow, or Queen Anne's lace, and those are invasives. And I say they're not invasive, and then we have no way of. So you've got 3 very separate categories. It's maybe the simplest thing to the most complicated. Separately, bamboo is the only one where you know some person intentionally planted something. And this document is squirrely because it indicates that everything they're considering is planted intentionally. And that's going to get you into another mess. And so there's a very strong distinction, I think, between bamboo and the rest. And the intermediates are bad, but different. And they work right. Nobody's planting the bad ones, I don't think, anymore, certainly. People may be messing with be ambiguous, and everybody agrees that bamboo should go. Correct?
And what about
Ivy's not there,
non-native?
and ivy in my view is another invasive, and it's
Can I?
you get in a big mess if you do like something like it, something you don't. And it's,
Well, that's why it's not.
you're gonna have a tough time anyway, right? So.
Can I ask you, are you actually, since you spoke to it so eloquently, are we better off with nothing on the books or this right here? As it is right now? And I'll get to where I'm going after that in a second. Are we better off with nothing as it is right now? Or are we better off with this ordinance as it reads here?
I think you.
My thought process is maybe we want to vote on going forward and then we can just
No, I
change
think
it.
It would depend very much on the way you enforce it. And that makes it difficult. The enforcement is very obtuse.
All right, so maybe,
Very complicated.
This is the penalty is not a small penalty. It's
No.
$500 a day plus cost for each day on which a violation has occurred after the 30-day window and any reasonable extension if there's, efforts for abatement. I'm not comfortable advancing an ordinance that's so open, and I think the point Mr. Fuller is making is invasive plants just as including. Again, that's wide breadth. I'm not going to pretend to know all the vines and invasives that we ought to include, not my area. But I do think that it may be worthwhile for us to parse this out and make sure that we're comfortable with it 100%.
Well, can we propose some amendments tonight? It's on for introduction. This is not too hard to at least discuss some amendments. I'm looking at the last paragraph that says what certain language involved with invasives. It's like specific concern. It lists this, which is what which is talking about. All native and non-native vines is very broad. It's a little.
Well, and vegetation. I mean,
Vines and vegetation.
this is, I think, Ms. Fuller, it was your email that said this is what neighbor fights are all about. Or someone wrote that in their email. I mean, I could imagine.
How about if we just pass it with respect to bamboo tonight?
Yes.
And then with the intent of adding
leaving
plans,
this
but much
section
more
open.
specific.
Yeah, we can do that. That would be my suggestion as well. Yeah, that we proceed on the bamboo and then carry
Greg,
14.
can that be done?
I was correct. But it's one thing to say, oh, we're gonna pass it by taking out provisions, but actually gonna change the title. So you don't really have legislation in front of you without these. I mean, I think there's two routes to take. We just come back next time and introduce it with just the bamboo regardless, right? I mean, it's not two routes. Really, the action plan is come back next time, I'll put it back down to bamboo, proper spending, advertising, what have you. Then we just do the bamboo, we know that everyone's in favor of it, right? The second part is really, it's intentionally made on the invasive because the enforcement is really what drove this through. With the intention, it's probably what this came from before. But if you guys aren't comfortable with that, we just want to do. We don't have to have necessarily the gradation. So if everyone agrees that tree heading and, not a box, but there's a couple of things to do like that. Right? That was pretty clear. You could just make that the invasive plants and we could take out the invasive buffer zone part and just make them prohibited. So you can't have tree heading, you can't have but what that list is would really just be basically collapsing the definitions and then redoing 11.4 just to prohibit plants that we all agree are invasive.
That's a little bit better. I can see the value of it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think as it's written.
But I want to ask people with some expertise.
Yes.
Like the part of that plan is,
Yes.
you know, the one is just get to the bed, next time clean. Well, like the second part is, we need some like reflection of the plans. Seems like this gentleman is when we won. You know, get that couple of people.
So we're gonna table that for,
I think you have
is
a
that what we're
table,
saying?
you just don't have a
Okay.
conversation already.
Okay.
And we're just gonna move back for the next time. I can bring another one to the workshop, even if that just goes off to a committee to tell us about the plans. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question in here, so we can bring back like a workable form next time. So you guys, so the gentleman raised the concern that the invasives is kind of vague, and I read an email chain someplace earlier about neighbor hate factor that's up to the government. Like, there's clearly plants you don't want here to prohibit, like the prohibited plants doesn't seem to be objectionable, it's really the invasive. So what if we made the prohibited plants the invasives and just made invasive prohibited? That's the problem. We go back to me. Because I'm gonna call it something different. What if we got rid of the invasive plants and kept the prohibited, and you guys appropriately defined the prohibited?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I mean. Although in the end, to keep the title, you'll understand what it is. There'll probably be no prohibited plants, there'll probably be invasive plants. And then they'll just be prohibited, the invasive category, as it is now, will be taken out of that sense. The terminology might change, but we're gonna collapse it down and just look prohibited.
What happens if you're not?
Joe, you obviously brought up.
Like if you're not comfortable planting them, like mine was just a pop up. Right. That I didn't plant, that I didn't know where they came from, I sent them first. So what if someone, so then am I responsible for, like, it's expensive to get rid of them, I can't.
Yes, yes. And that's the part of the concern is, and it's going to happen to people.
That's what's the neat, I think, separation between bamboo and all the rest. Because I think somebody planted bamboo. You're seeing the result. With what you call the prohibitives, they probably came in, they didn't come in with someone noticing that they came in and they weren't planted. So the residents you talk to or encounter for those two things is going to feel very differently and going to feel very differently about those.
Right, and so leaving it in ambiguity makes it more difficult on like the lower levels of the basics. But if, you know, the tree of heaven happens to see happens to come and fall in your blood, it takes over the entire back of your yard. We feel more comfortable telling someone that makes sense, at least because of the severity of the plant.
Yes.
So like, well, you have to have one or the other if you want to affect enforcement of your plan.
Yeah, I'm trying to say something like, talk to a resident and you say, here's the plant that we have all been bad with. If it's here, we were bad. If the prohibitives are here, they may be bad, but it wasn't anybody's intention.
But the issue of, I was getting the culpability.
And yeah, and I think that's more probably for people, for politicians that are concerned about citizens and residents responding. They're two serious ones, prohibitives and serious. Treated very, they're easy to consider isolated, easy. The invasives, as they're written, tremendously long range. So you have a very difficult time knowing what you're talking about. The neatness says bamboo first, and then if you want to, you can take up the others because they can be done neatly, but they're really separate from the bamboo.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving along, 2022-04 supplement Borough Code, Chapter 7-39.4 to include 626 River Road. Does anyone have any conversation they want to have on this?
Sorry, Nate, you're on the consent agenda?
No, right above the consent. Anyone have anything they want to discuss? Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second. Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Yes.
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 Thank you. Moving along to the consent agenda, before I ask for a vote or for a motion on the resolutions, does anyone want to separate anything from the consent agenda?
I just have a point of information. On 2022-127, I meant to ask this earlier and we must have moved along. The change order is the only actual change is the increase in costs associated with the project. There's nothing else that functionally changed.
Yeah, cost of labor.
That's it. Correct, thank you.
So, May, that was the item I'd like to pull for a separate discussion to just clarify a couple.
You still like to
Yes.
pull it? Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna pull 2022-127 to be discussed separately. We're gonna vote on the consent agenda 2022-120 to 126, and then again from 128 to 129. Does anyone have anything they want to talk about before we ask for a motion here? No? Do I vote?
Motion.
Second, anyone want a second?
Second.
Allison, may I please have a roll call?
Yes.
Paul, yes,
Yes.
McHugh.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilwoman Cole. Would you like to discuss?
Introduce it and second for just then discussion.
Motion.
2022-127.
Second.
The reason I wanted to just pull this for discussion is to clarify for members of the body as well as the members of the public, there was an increase in this job due to cost of materials. And wanted to, and we have our borough engineer here tonight, who can confirm for us that the increase is due to cost of materials related to the times of living right now. There is no additional percentage increase on the job by the contractor. Contractors usually attach a percentage for their fee. Rich, you want to confirm that for the topic?
The increase is per pay item. So it's specific to the product, whether it's the cost of concrete or the cost of a railroad tie or whatever it may be. It's not building additional overhead and profit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on that? No? Okay, I'd like to ask if anyone has a motion on 2022-127.
We already got it.
Got it? All right. Can I get a roll call, please, Allison?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Department reports, April of 2022, dog license, municipal clerk, budget status. Do I have a motion to accept the reports as submitted?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we are at good of the borough. Please stand and identify yourself by clearly stating your name and address for the record. Please observe a time limit of 3 minutes. Yes. Hi, Marty.
I know when we started out this discussion or, it's kind of like suddenly something today. And I would guess that we're very sensitive to this, but I just wanted to put on the record that, you know, if there's a way maybe to scale back because the climate is just so uncertain right now. I think it's going to be very important to really find out what we're spending and maybe to stage different projects a little bit differently. So that I would just ask you to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you. And I can tell you that everyone up here is well aware of the implications and we're taking it very seriously.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sorry.
Very really before we move on to Sarah, first I'd like to thank Council Todd and Nick Torchensky for answering questions that you had. I sent an email to all of you, and you may not have that time to read it, but hopefully you will. One of the first things, and this is for the betterment, I would like to thank, I'm sorry, if you would please bring the construction department back to Fairfield. I feel that there's a real disconnect. the things go on and maybe, you know, once we pass it on to them, it's up to Rumsfeld to make sure that things get done. The second thing is, could you please not allow construction of houses? I'm not talking about mowing lawns on the weekends. This house behind us last summer, they didn't work on it all week. Come the weekend, they had people doing the siding. And so you have that, you know, the thing for the nail gun going all day long. And they even work on 4th of July. Is there something about that they're not supposed to work holidays? No, I'm just asking that. That's for the betterment of everybody. Of course, we've been putting up with this house for 2 years. And then the third thing is, and I don't know if you know this, but there's a rule in New Jersey that when they're cutting any kind of, you know, brick or stone, that they are supposed to use a wet saw. They pick the busiest day, they don't have a wet saw, their workers are supposed to have masks. How do you enforce that? Who does that? You know, am I supposed to call the health department and say, this builder has, they're not using a wet saw? This, because the silica from the stone affects your lungs, and we all know since COVID, that's even worse. And our kids walk around, everybody walks around. Anyway, that's it. I hope you read the email.
Mrs. Briel?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. I think we're going to be following up on a bunch of those.
Well, one of the things about the thing on the weekend, what we had happen is that this builder was putting in a hot water line, a cold water line, and what we thought was drainage into the garage. Now, I called Rumson, and she stopped immediately, but if it had been a weekend, they just would have been on the right way. And of course, once you told them, they buried it. So now you go over to check and you don't see it, it's buried.
So the construction office did stop the work?
They did, yes.
And for how long was the suspended?
Oh, that I don't know. She said that they were supposed to reapply to be able.
They were working today. They were working on that house today. You talking about the big white house on the corner of Spruce?
Yes.
It's not on the corner, Spruce.
No, it's
When you come up and you bend,
around
it's
the
in that
curve.
corner,
It's in the
that
it's in the
inside
curve.
corner.
Yeah.
Yes, on the left.
Yeah.
They were working today.
Yeah, the water lines that we're referring to?
Yeah, I did send them in the emails, the pictures, if you can get them, you know, just let us know.
Teresa, what do we pay annually? I'm assuming that interlocal we have with Brunson or construction.
What's the interlocal agreement this year? I have to pull the exact number up, I'm gonna say around 212, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to look at my budget doc.
Will that be appropriate for the agenda for our engineering DPW meeting?
You mean to bring construction back to
To
Fairhaven?
discuss this in committee, a council committee.
It's not really engineering and DPW, it's a broader topic than that.
Well, I'm suggesting we work on it and get some more facts for the governing body.
We could workshop it, see what
Okay.
information we need.
I'd like to start with understanding what we pay,
Yeah.
how it's funded.
I'd like to know too why it was moved in the first place. I'm sure there's a story there and, you know.
Yeah, when,
Those who get small amounts, you know, that's that. So it's just a-
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I have one.
You know, maybe I'll just ask on the heels of Mrs. Briel chiming in about the property on Spruce, and I'm not picking on them, it just happens to be an example. There's been some issues with that development of that property over the past year or so. I've been over there a couple times, chatting with the Briels, we've talked about it. It's, you know, the emails have gone there. I guess one of my questions, Mayor, would be, I know the land use committee has been working. Do we know or have a expectation of when we might hear from them a bit more?
That's a loaded question. I think we've moved the ball closer to the goal line.
Okay.
But there's still some expertise related components to the recommendations that we're trying to push through, and we're
Right.
trying to work through that.
Okay.
But I'm still an optimist from the standpoint of like, I would hope 60 days.
Okay, yeah, I think what the Brios are experiencing, and I'm sure they're not alone, is that there's an exacerbation of some of the land use ordinances being in place, and then the construction department issues, and seeing things happen and then being able to enforce it. So it's sort of this wrap around. And so I think if we can start looking at those things, ticking through the list, we're looking at the land use, that's going to come before us, I guess, within 60 days or so. Tracy, you suggested we put it on for tonight. That'll be progress, at least, so that some of those issues that are all, compounding, at least,
And I would add that some of the matters that were brought forward by the members of the Borough Business Association have to do with actually opening a business and making changes or working with the borough to get those sorts of processes in place of the needed. It touches on some of the same procedural issues.
And that's true of residential as well.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's a wraparound. Yeah.
The common theme here is we hear you. I mean, we hear everyone in all of these different components, and we're trying to make the borough a better place for everyone to live and to work. And when we hear an ordeal like that, I mean, I guess we can sit here and apologize, but that doesn't help the fact that you had to live with it for 2 years. All we can do is figure out moving forward, how can we stop that from happening for other residents, and hope that it doesn't happen again, on the other side of your house.
Oh, we have construction all over. This is like.
So you're done. It's like the family that they all had COVID and now they're out and about and they don't have to worry about it anymore.
This is the worst. This is the worst building. I have to say, but I'm not saying his name.
So Michael Ducelli, since we're talking about developments, I'm just wondering if there's any updates on the Colonial Court and the house that's just sitting open, and how long that's allowed to be sitting there open. And the project's been on for about like 9-10 years. So they haven't finished the house because I guess they're in a trial. So it's been sitting there like as a construction zone for at least probably close to a year now.
I'm not even aware of that.
What is the litigation about?
It's not.
Is this Colonial Court?
I mean, they took the dumpster finally. It's just, there's garbage everywhere, flows into our yard. I mean, there's like parts, there was scaffolding up part of it. There's big holes in the backyard that are trenches that I'm not sure what they're meant for.
Bamboo.
Who's the
They're gonna
litigation
plant
with?
bamboo.
I'm not sure.
Well, we have property maintenance code, certainly enforcement. Just today, if we go look at whatever the maintenance code currently in place could do to contain or control the site a little bit. I don't know the nature of the legal matter, nor would I don't believe I'm entitled to it either.
Is it on Colonial Court?
Yes, it was the end of the original Colonial Court. It was the house that, I guess there had been a house at one point, and it was torn down years ago. So it's the last house in that project.
Is that part of the Hughes project?
Yes.
And he owns it?
He owns it, yeah. I don't think the whole project's been closed.
With the buyer. So between Hughes and the buyer. And
Greg, is
going
there
on
any-
9 years?
Is there anything we can do about that type of situation?
So you can't just keep it short.
Yeah.
Because it was purpose for some official jurisdictions there, and they have a problem with the government county board of appeals.
So is that on me?
No. There's her official. And if we can't address it that way, if it's all wrapped up in a legal matter, then is our only way to address site hazards or.
Essentially, their permits will run out of the next station. So they don't run out, they don't reach the deadline, so they have to start again. That's their permits.
In the meantime, this is sounding a maintenance code issue.
I mean, I've never seen the place, so I have no idea, but I mean, you know, taking someone to municipal court with a property maintenance ticket is very rarely the most effective way to resolve the issue. The construction official has far greater powers than property maintenance. And so I would suggest starting there and then running down the tree ultimately. But if it's an active construction site that just stops work, construction. Where you start.
I'll talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Rodriguez?
Just wanted to thank the mayor, the council, Teresa, Greg, Allison, everybody who helped set up this room and do the, we'll forget Greg then, he's out.
I was just here.
I did see you here early. I know there were folks that did dress rehearsals in here. I'm pretty excited that we had this meeting here. I think seeing people who are on various sides of not just the dais, but around the room is really important. I can only see a fraction of the people in the other room where we have our normal meetings. I like hearing people. I know there's a bit of an echo which can be handled, but I do like the ability to hear everyone as well. I think that with better microphones, this is designed for a room about 1/12 the size of this room, this owl. So it's picking up all kinds of different things. I'm getting all kinds of text messages. So thank you everybody out there who's watching and listening. I don't believe we'll have another meeting here until we start addressing some of the technical and acoustic needs, but I do think this room, I'm really excited. I have never done a meeting in this room with the council. So I think it was a good step forward. It's really great that we actually took advantage of the space to see how it worked and how it didn't work. And I think we've learned a lot in just one session. So just want to applaud everybody for taking that step.
Can I take it one step further?
Thank you.
Councilwoman, thank you, Councilman.
I agree with what you said, but I'd be interested in like what Marty or Susan, you know, who are residents that come regularly to our meetings to see what they think about
Yeah.
having a meeting here.
It's a Q&A.
I like to say that they're all here, right? And it's open, I'm not looking at, oh, right. You see the visual reaction and whatnot. And I think it's great. You were set it up here in the front. Your audience back here, I think that would work.
We started that on the L, so
I feel like we're on an episode of Schitt's Creek. Do you know, when I was on your town council and they're in a group like this, right?
Does anyone else have any public comments?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, one sec, Ron. Yeah.
I don't think.
So to answer, she's saying she doesn't think we need to raise the dais. I'm not going to disagree with you. The one thing I would say, which is more something we have to figure out on our own, is I find it hard to see. I can't see Teresa. I don't even know if Teresa's here or not. There she is. So we need to figure out the configuration, but understood. Robin?
Robin and Neil, and I'm his River Road. The reason I came out tonight is to support this idea. I moved here 6 years ago, and I only came to this building by Centennial Hall 3 months ago, when I came to Berrien and Green Tea to find out if we wanted to have our event next Saturday here. And I looked at, nobody can miss the exterior view of this property, and I was so disappointed. I was so dismayed that it stands in such stark comparison to the affluent neighborhood that we live in. And I thought, shame on us. Like, where is the support for this historic gem? And then I came into the property with our group, and I went to, I went quietly to this side, like went around. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This history is right in front of us. This is a story we're told to our kids and to our grandchildren. We need to preserve this history. And we need to preserve this legacy because we preserve our souls if we do. And Fairhaven becomes such a better town because of it. But I'm also here to tell you that I'm not asking the borough for anything. I'm asking the borough what can I do for you to help this become to pump up, some heart and some blood into this place to get people to know it and use it as a community base. And also, I know there's a conversation going on about the outside that has to be done, almost pristinely. We need to be very, very careful about those 2 trees in the front, and the approach needs to complement this fabulous place.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Is there someone in the back? No? Teresa, anyone?
Hands up.
Okay.
First up is Ruth Blazer again. Ruth, please unmute yourself.
Hi, Ruth.
You were asking about comments. If you think it's noisy and reverberating now, you want to get about 40 seniors in there on a senior meeting.
Okay. And Ruth, that's good feedback. And, maybe we want to have that senior meeting in here and see how that goes and see.
No, we've been having them there and it's been awful.
Okay. That is good feedback. I'd like to, perhaps, are you going to have another one in here, or is that?
Yes, our next one's on the 17th.
Okay, I'd like to get out to that next meeting if I could, if possible.
You just got the mayor to attend the meeting.
Thank you, Ruth.
Now, sir, I've got Bill Perkins. Go ahead, Bill.
Hi, how are you? Just a couple of quick things. One, in terms of the initial comments that were made on the invasive species. First off, I wanted to point out that there's over 100 plants on the invasive species list in New Jersey. So I think that anybody that has an older property in town probably has invasive species on their property. So I agree with Megan that we need to look at the ordinance because the way it's written, anybody with ivy, with the Norway maple, with Cornus cusa, with one of the other butterfly bush, you could receive up to a $500 fine if you don't remove it. So I do think it's good that you show this. My second question, specific question, I wanted to know if we did hire or do we plan to hire a construction manager to manage facilities projects?
We have proposals. I don't believe we executed on them.
For the owner's rep? Yeah, so for the owner's rep.
For the initial
Yeah.
phase only, okay,
Right.
yeah.
Which was, you're going to tell them what it is, just notes.
Yeah.
Initial phase is just for estimating.
Pre-construction work.
Right.
So for pre-construction, have they performed the cost estimates? Or had we had the A&E do the cost estimates? The cost estimate that was presented, my concern is the cost estimate that was presented in the Zoom meeting is very, very broad. So if we're paying a consultant, especially now that I hear that, if we're paying a consultant to do pre-construction services, I would think that they would be the ones going through these drawings and detailing a cost estimate and where cost savings can be made. I guess, and the second part of my question then is, do we think we're going to be hiring a CM to run the construction phase?
Opinion, I think we should, but we haven't gone there yet. We do have the ability to add on phases to the, we didn't want to bite off too much with the consultant. If it didn't work out, we would have the out. But we do want to see how it goes with them and then move forward from there.
Okay, I just would like to add that I do think that those fees then need to be brought forward in the cost estimate that people are looking at for this overall project. We're kind of keeping people in the dark, which leads me to the last thing I would like to say is I think it's great that we put the facilities plan on the website and we're telling people what it is. But again, we don't tell people how much this costs. So unless people sat in on the Zoom or listened in on the Zoom, they don't know how far over budget we really are. And that's what concerns me. I don't want to see this project killed. I know that there's a lot of time and energy put into it. And any further delay is going to also add to the cost. But I think we have to be cognizant of how far over budget we really are. And we have to take steps to try and mitigate that.
Yeah, Bill, I think that your note hit on a lot of good points. You know, we started this, I don't know, you were participating in the meetings probably in 2018, 2019 and so forth. And then, as you know, the pandemic and costs have shot up due to supply chain and also through inflation. I don't know that they're going to get any better. We had some suggestions that had come in the room and then also in email and over the phone to try to phase them in or trim them back. And we're going to try to do the absolute best we can to get back to something reasonable. We've also got to consider how we fund it. Councilwoman Cole raised this earlier today in an email to me and Lily Neff, our councilwoman who leads the finance committee, about alternatives to funding this. But the interest rates right now, I think last Wednesday, they went up 50 basis points from the Fed, and that's actually not going to get any better going forward. We're going to see increased interest rate hikes. So anything we might save by delaying might come back and bite us in interest rate costs. So we'll get less building for the same amount of money. So there's a lot of things at play here, and some of it might be value engineering, some of it might be scaling back, some of it might be being clever or crafty about how we address some of these issues. But I'm totally behind these facilities. And most importantly, not even the buildings, but the people that are in those buildings and getting them an environment that's suitable for Fairhaven employees. And we're going to do everything we can. I don't want to speak for everyone on the council, but I'm pretty sure the sentiment here is to address all of these things in the most cost-effective manner as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
I don't have any other hands from the public there.
Okay. With that being said, we're going to move towards executive session. Formal action will not be taken. 10:22 p.m.
It's too much.
1 minute per topic.
No, seriously, I can't.
Anyone opposed?
Motion to close?
Motion adjourned at 11:39 PM.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Good night, Fairhaven.
Does anybody watch all the way to the end while it's not? Did we record that whole
There's like-
hour and a half?
There's like always one. I was teaching high school in the mornings. There'd be like 2 or 3.